Scattered throughout the world are ancient discoveries that seem to whisper of knowledge far beyond their age. Colossal stoneworks fitted with astonishing precision, enigmatic symbols etched into enduring surfaces, and remarkable relics recovered from long-sealed sites continue to challenge conventional understanding. Each finding adds another layer to an enduring puzzle that remains incomplete. So sit back, relax, and let's venture into these extraordinary archaeological mysteries. High on the limestone slopes of Keash Caves Mountain in County Sligo, Ireland, a line of dark openings cuts into the pale rock face. Known as the Keash Caves, these ancient chambers overlook a landscape of rolling fields, scattered forests, and distant hills. From afar, the caves resemble watchful eyes staring across the countryside. In changing light, their entrances shift from welcoming shelters to silent voids, creating an atmosphere that has inspired curiosity for generations. The Keash Caves are not the work of human hands. They were formed naturally over immense spans of time as water gradually dissolved the limestone, carving out a network of cavities and passages within the mountain. Today, 17 visible cave openings punctuate the hillside, each with its own character and depth. Some extend only a short distance into the rock, while others lead farther into darkness. Archaeologists and historians have long been drawn to this remarkable site. Excavations carried out during the early 20th century revealed evidence that people had visited or occupied these caves for thousands of years. Animal bones discovered within the chambers included remains of species that once roamed Ireland after the last ice age, offering valuable clues about the region's distant past. Alongside these finds were traces of human activity, suggesting that the caves served various purposes over different periods. Yet, it is not only archaeology that gives the Keash Caves their enduring fascination. The caves occupy a prominent place in Irish mythology and folklore. According to ancient tales, the mountain was associated with legendary figures and supernatural events. Stories passed down through generations describe hidden realms, magical beings, and entrances to worlds that existed alongside ordinary reality. In these traditions, caves were rarely viewed as simple geological formations. They were thresholds, places where the boundaries between known and unknown seemed thinner. One legend connects the caves to the ancient narrative cycle surrounding Queen Medb and other figures of Irish mythology. The mountain appears in stories involving mysterious creatures and dramatic journeys. Whether these accounts preserve distant cultural memories or represent symbolic storytelling remains a subject of interpretation. What is clear is that the caves became woven into the imaginative landscape of Ireland, gaining significance far beyond their physical form. As researchers examined the evidence, more practical explanations emerged. The caves may have provided temporary shelter for travelers, refuge during periods of unrest, or locations for seasonal activities. Their elevated position offers expansive views of the surrounding terrain, making them strategically useful as lookout points. The discoveries inside the caves fit comfortably within broader patterns of human use observed at similar sites throughout Europe. And yet, certain questions continue to linger. Why did particular caves attract repeated visits over centuries, while others nearby remained largely unused? Were some chambers valued for reasons that left little trace in the archaeological record? Could rituals, beliefs, or traditions have influenced how people interacted with these spaces? Material evidence can reveal tools, bones, and artifacts, but it often struggles to capture the full texture of ancient thought. More speculative theories occasionally emerge from enthusiasts and independent researchers. Some suggest that the caves held ceremonial significance tied to astronomical events or sacred geography. Others propose connections to hidden traditions now lost to history. There is little direct evidence supporting such claims, but their persistence reflects a broader truth. Places like the Keash Caves invite imagination as much as investigation. Standing before the entrances today, it is easy to understand why. Wind moves through the grass, shadows gather within the openings, and the mountain remains largely unchanged despite the passage of countless generations. Archaeology has illuminated parts of the story, folklore has preserved another layer, and the landscape itself continues to hold its silence. Whether the Keash Caves have yielded all their secrets, or whether deeper chapters remain concealed within stone and memory, is a question that still lingers among those who look up at the mountain and wonder. While the Keash Caves leave us contemplating what may still lie concealed within stone and memory, our journey now moves southward toward a windswept ridge overlooking the Mediterranean. Here, another ancient site presents a different kind of puzzle, one shaped not by natural caverns, but by thousands of years of human devotion, transformation, and unanswered questions. On a gentle rise near the southeastern coast of Malta stands Tas-Silġ, an archaeological site unlike almost any other in the Mediterranean. At first glance, it appears modest. Weathered foundations, fragments of walls, and scattered remains resting beneath the island's bright sky. Yet these stones represent layer upon layer of history, accumulated over millennia. Few places reveal such a continuous sequence of human activity, stretching from prehistoric times through multiple civilizations and belief systems. The site occupies a commanding position overlooking Marsexlock Bay. Sea breezes move across the ridge, carrying the scent of salt water and the distant sound of waves. From this vantage point, ancient sailors approaching Malta would likely have seen the elevated sanctuary long before reaching shore. Its visibility may have been one reason why the location became so significant. Archaeological evidence suggests that Tas-Silġ began as a prehistoric temple complex around the 3rd millennium BC. During this era, Malta was home to a remarkable temple-building culture responsible for some of the oldest monumental stone structures in the world. Massive blocks were carefully arranged to create ceremonial spaces, whose exact purpose remains only partially understood. Like many prehistoric sanctuaries on the islands, Tas-Silġ appears to have held deep spiritual importance. What makes the site particularly unusual is what happened afterward. Rather than being abandoned and forgotten, the sanctuary continued to evolve. New cultures arrived, each adapting the location for their own religious traditions. The Phoenicians established a major sanctuary there, likely dedicated to the goddess Astarte. Later, under Roman influence, the site became associated with Juno. Centuries afterward, Christian communities transformed portions of the complex into a church. Most ancient sacred sites eventually fall out of use as societies change. Tas-Silġ followed a different path. Generation after generation returned to the same ridge, modifying existing structures while preserving something of the site's original significance. Why did this specific location maintain its sacred status for so long? Was it simply a practical choice, or did successive cultures perceive something special about the place itself? Ancient writings provide intriguing clues. Historical sources describe a renowned sanctuary in Malta that attracted visitors from distant regions. Some accounts suggest that sailors regarded it with particular reverence, believing it offered protection during dangerous voyages. Maritime trade connected Malta to vast networks stretching across the Mediterranean, and Tas-Silġ may have occupied an important position within that world. Yet the site's long history creates mysteries as well as answers. Excavations have uncovered evidence from dramatically different eras layered upon one another. Stones originally placed by prehistoric builders were incorporated into later religious structures. Artifacts connected to multiple belief systems appear within the same complex. Untangling these overlapping chapters is a challenge for archaeologists, and some aspects of the site's development remain uncertain. There are also questions about what has been lost. Not all areas of Tas-Silġ have been fully explored. Centuries of rebuilding, erosion, and human activity have altered the landscape. Beneath visible remains may lie undiscovered features capable of changing current interpretations. Each excavation reveals new details, yet also highlights how incomplete the picture remains. More speculative ideas have naturally emerged around a site with such extraordinary continuity. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have suggested that sacred locations possess qualities that transcend individual cultures. In this view, successive peoples were drawn to Tas-Silġ because they recognized a significance already embedded within the landscape. Others point to possible astronomical alignments or environmental features that may have influenced ancient perceptions of the ridge. None of these theories have achieved broad acceptance, yet they persist because the central mystery remains compelling. Across thousands of years, societies with different languages, customs, and religions repeatedly chose the same location for worship. The reasons may be entirely understandable through archaeology and history, or there may be subtler factors that have yet to be fully recognized. Today, the ruins rest quietly beneath the Maltese sun. The great ceremonies have ended, the pilgrims are gone, and the voices that once filled the sanctuary have faded into silence. Yet the stones remain, preserving traces of countless generations who looked upon this place and found meaning there. Whether Tas-Silġ has revealed all the reasons for its remarkable endurance, or whether some deeper story still waits beneath the surface, is a question that continues to linger among those who walk its ancient ground. As the quiet ruins of Tas-Silġ leave us reflecting on why certain places retain their significance through the centuries, our path now leads far from the Mediterranean. Beyond rugged mountains and vast stretches of Central Asia lies another site whose existence remained hidden from much of the modern world for thousands of years. Here, in an arid landscape shaped by shifting rivers and relentless winds, an ancient city emerged from the sands carrying mysteries that continue to challenge historians today. Gonur Depe rises from the plains of present-day Turkmenistan, like the ghost of a forgotten kingdom. Surrounded by the remnants of an ancient oasis, the site appears almost improbable against its stark surroundings. Crumbling walls, weathered foundations, and the outlines of once grand structures spread across the landscape, hinting at a civilization that flourished where few would expect one to exist. The city belonged to what archaeologists call the Bactria Margiana Archaeological Complex, often abbreviated as BMAC. Dating primarily to the late 3rd and early 2nd millennium BC, Gonur Depe was one of the most important urban centers in the region. For centuries, its remains lay concealed beneath layers of earth and sand, until systematic excavations began revealing the scale of what had once stood there. What emerged surprised many researchers. At the heart of the settlement stood a fortified complex surrounded by massive defensive walls. Beyond it stretched residential districts, ceremonial spaces, workshops, and sophisticated water management systems. The city's layout suggested careful planning and considerable organizational ability. This was not a small settlement struggling against a harsh environment. It was a thriving center supported by agriculture, trade, and social structures complex enough to sustain a substantial population. Excavations uncovered an extraordinary range of artifacts. Finely crafted pottery, decorative seals, metal objects, jewelry, and evidence of long-distance trade pointed to a society connected to broader networks extending across ancient Asia. Materials originating hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away eventually found their way to Gonur Depe. Such discoveries revealed a level of interaction that challenged earlier assumptions about the isolation of ancient communities in this region. Yet despite decades of study, many aspects of the civilization remain elusive. One of the most intriguing discoveries involves structures interpreted by some archaeologists as ritual or ceremonial complexes. Certain areas contain features that appear linked to religious practices, including installations associated with fire and liquid offerings. These findings have led some scholars to explore possible connections between Gonur Depe and the early development of religious traditions that later spread across parts of Asia. The evidence, however, remains open to interpretation. What exactly took place within these ceremonial spaces? Were they centers of communal worship, locations for elite rituals, or something entirely different? Archaeology provides clues, but rarely complete narratives. Fragments of architecture and scattered objects can suggest possibilities, yet the beliefs and experiences of the people themselves remain largely beyond reach. The surrounding environment adds another layer of mystery. Gonur Depe flourished within the Murghab Delta, a region once fed by branching river systems. Water made life possible in what would otherwise have been an unforgiving landscape. Over time, however, environmental changes altered these waterways. As rivers shifted course, settlements dependent upon them faced increasing challenges. This explanation offers a plausible reason for the civilization's decline. Yet the story is more complex than a simple environmental collapse. Archaeological evidence suggests gradual transformations rather than a single catastrophic event. Populations moved, traditions evolved, and centers of activity changed. The precise sequence remains difficult to reconstruct. Some researchers have wondered whether Gonur Depe played a larger role in ancient history than currently recognized. Could it have been part of a cultural network whose influence extended far beyond Central Asia? Might discoveries still waiting beneath unexcavated sections of the site reshape understanding of early urban development? Such questions continue to inspire investigation. More speculative theories occasionally venture further. Because of its sophisticated architecture, unusual ceremonial structures, and long-hidden nature, Gonur Depe has attracted interpretations ranging from lost kingdoms described in ancient traditions to connections with legendary cultures remembered only in fragments of myth. Mainstream archaeology approaches such claims cautiously, emphasizing evidence over speculation. Yet the persistence of these ideas reflects the powerful impression the site leaves upon those who encounter its story. Today, the winds still sweep across the ancient ruins. The walls that once enclosed bustling streets now stand silent beneath the open sky. Generations lived, worked, worshipped, and built their lives here, leaving traces that survived for thousands of years. Much has been uncovered, yet vast portions of the past remain concealed. And as researchers continue to examine this remarkable city, one question quietly endures. How much of Gonur Depe's true story is still waiting beneath the earth, unseen and undiscovered? As the winds continue to move across the silent ruins of Gonur Depe, carrying with them echoes of a civilization whose full story remains incomplete, our journey shifts once again. This time, we travel to the rugged highlands of South America, where another mystery lies hidden not beneath drifting sands, but deep within the earth itself. Here, carved into mountainsides and concealed beneath rolling green landscapes, are chambers that seem to blur the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. In the remote Andean region of southwestern Colombia lies Tierradentro, a place whose name translates as inside the land. Few descriptions could be more fitting. Scattered across a mountainous landscape of mist-covered ridges, steep valleys, and dense vegetation are some of the most remarkable underground structures ever discovered in the Americas. At first glance, the region appears tranquil. The hills rise gently against the horizon, interrupted only by patches of farmland and clusters of trees. Yet beneath this peaceful scenery exists an unseen world. Hidden below the surface are dozens of subterranean tombs, known as hypogea, carefully carved into volcanic rock centuries ago. Descending into one of these chambers is an experience unlike visiting most archaeological sites. Stone stairways spiral downward through narrow shafts. As daylight gradually fades, intricate geometric patterns begin to emerge from the darkness. Red, black, and white designs cover walls, columns, and ceilings. The chambers feel both architectural and symbolic, as though they were intended to represent something larger than simple burial spaces. Archaeologists believe many of these tombs were constructed between roughly the 6th and 9th centuries AD by societies that inhabited the region long before European arrival. The underground chambers likely served as collective burial sites for important individuals and community members. Their elaborate decoration suggests that death was viewed not merely as an ending, but as part of a larger spiritual framework. Yet despite decades of research, much about the people who created Tierradentro remains uncertain. Unlike some ancient civilizations that left extensive written records, the builders of these remarkable structures left few direct explanations. Their voices survive primarily through architecture, artwork, and artifacts. As a result, researchers must reconstruct their world from fragments scattered across the landscape. The tombs themselves provide important clues. Many contain columns carved to resemble wooden supports, even though the chambers were excavated directly into solid rock. Why recreate features that were not structurally necessary? Some scholars suggest the designs may have mirrored ceremonial buildings that once stood above ground. Others believe the chambers represented symbolic versions of sacred spaces intended for the afterlife. The vivid painted motifs add another layer of intrigue. Repeating geometric forms, stylized human figures, and abstract designs appear throughout the underground complexes. While archaeologists can identify recurring themes, the precise meanings behind many of these images remain unknown. Were they connected to cosmological beliefs? Did they represent ancestral lineages, spiritual journeys, or concepts now lost to time? Questions multiply the deeper one looks. The construction of the hypogea required significant planning, labor, and technical skill. Workers excavated large chambers with surprising precision, often creating symmetrical layouts and carefully proportioned interiors. Such achievements suggest organized communities capable of coordinating complex projects. Yet many details of their social structure remain elusive. Adding to the mystery is the relative isolation of the region. Nestled within difficult terrain, Tierradentro developed in an environment that could both connect and separate communities. Trade and cultural exchange certainly occurred, but the extent of those interactions continues to be debated. How much influence came from neighboring societies, and how much emerged independently within these mountains? Over the years, more speculative interpretations have also appeared. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have proposed that the underground chambers encode astronomical knowledge or symbolic maps of spiritual realms. Others see parallels with sacred subterranean spaces found in distant cultures around the world. Such ideas remain difficult to verify, yet they highlight a recurring theme. The tombs seem to possess a significance that extends beyond their practical function. Even today, standing within one of these chambers can feel deeply unsettling. The painted forms emerge from shadowed walls. Silence settles heavily in the enclosed space. The stairway leading back to the surface appears distant, while the intentions of the builders remain just out of reach. Time itself seems compressed, as though centuries have folded inward around the observer. Researchers have uncovered remarkable insights into Tierradentro, but many mysteries endure. Entire chapters of the culture that created these underground worlds may never be fully recovered. The chambers continue to guard their secrets, offering glimpses rather than complete answers. And as each generation studies the site anew, one possibility remains impossible to ignore. Perhaps somewhere within these silent depths, another piece of the story is still waiting to be found. As we leave behind the underground chambers of Tierradentro, where ancient builders carved entire worlds into the earth, our journey leads to a very different landscape. Here, mystery rises not below the surface, but high above it. Towering stone pillars emerge from a forested setting, their weathered faces bearing the marks of both nature and human hands. For centuries, these formations have inspired wonder, speculation, and debate. becoming one of Europe's most enduring archaeological enigmas. In the heart of Germany's Teutoburg forest stands Externsteine, a striking cluster of sandstone rock formations unlike anything else in the surrounding landscape. Rising dramatically from the ground, the pillars reach heights of more than 30 meters, their jagged silhouettes dominating the horizon. Narrow passages wind between the rocks, while stairways, chambers, and carved features appear unexpectedly within the stone itself. At dawn, mist often drifts through the forest, wrapping the formations in a pale veil. The sandstone towers seem almost detached from the ordinary world, as though they belong to another era entirely. Visitors approaching the site for the first time frequently describe a feeling of isolation and quiet anticipation. The rocks command attention, not through sheer size alone, but through their unusual presence. Geologists explain that Externsteine is the result of natural processes operating over millions of years. Layers of sandstone were uplifted, fractured, and gradually shaped by erosion into the dramatic formations visible today. From a scientific perspective, the rocks are a remarkable geological phenomenon. Yet geology explains only part of the story. Human activity has altered the site in significant ways. Carved staircases lead upward through portions of the formation. Small chambers and niches appear within the stone. One of the most famous features is a medieval relief depicting the descent from the cross, carved directly into the rock face. These modifications reveal that people have interacted with Externsteine for centuries, transforming a natural landmark into a place of cultural and spiritual significance. The challenge lies in determining exactly how far that significance extends into the past. Historical records concerning the site's earliest use are surprisingly limited. Archaeologists have found evidence that the area was known and visited during prehistoric periods, but definitive proof regarding its original function remains elusive. Unlike many ancient ceremonial sites, Externsteine offers few clear answers. The rocks preserve traces of human presence, yet much of the context has been lost. This uncertainty has created fertile ground for speculation. One long-standing theory suggests that Externsteine may have served as a sacred location for pre-Christian communities. The dramatic appearance of the rocks certainly makes such an idea plausible. Throughout history, unusual natural formations have often acquired spiritual importance. Certain features at the site have been interpreted as possible ritual spaces, though evidence supporting these interpretations remains incomplete. Particular attention has been focused on a chamber near the summit of one of the rocks. Some researchers have proposed that it may have been used for astronomical observations. During specific times of the year, sunlight interacts with portions of the formation in ways that have attracted considerable interest. Could ancient observers have intentionally incorporated celestial alignments into the site's design? Or are these patterns simply coincidental products of the landscape? The debate continues. Mainstream scholarship generally approaches such claims with caution, emphasizing the limited archaeological evidence available. Yet the questions persist because Externsteine possesses characteristics that resist simple explanation. The combination of natural grandeur, human modification, and uncertain origins encourages continued investigation. Over the centuries, the site has accumulated layer upon layer of interpretation. Medieval Christians viewed it through one lens. Romantic writers and antiquarians approached it through another. More recent theories have connected the rocks to forgotten traditions, sacred geography, and ancient ceremonial practices. While many of these ideas remain unproven, they reflect a broader fascination with places that seem to stand outside conventional history. Walking among the formations today, it is easy to understand why. The towering sandstone walls create shifting patterns of light and shadow. Narrow pathways lead toward hidden corners and elevated viewpoints. Every carved staircase suggests a purpose, yet not always an obvious one. Every chamber raises new possibilities. Researchers continue to study Externsteine, uncovering details about its geology, archaeology, and historical use. Even so, the site retains an atmosphere of uncertainty that has never fully disappeared. The rocks have witnessed countless generations, preserving fragments of their stories while withholding others. And standing beneath those towering pillars, surrounded by silence and stone, one cannot help but wonder whether the most important chapter of Externsteine's history has yet to be discovered. As the stone pillars of Externsteine fade into memory, standing like silent sentinels in the forests of Europe, our journey crosses continents once again. This time the air grows thinner, the horizon wider, and the earth itself seems to hold a different kind of memory. High in the Andes, where the sky feels impossibly close and the landscape carries the weight of ancient civilizations, another enigmatic sight emerges, one that continues to challenge both history and imagination. At the heart of Tiwanaku, in present-day Bolivia, lies Kalasasaya, a monumental platform that once formed part of one of the most influential ceremonial centers in pre-Columbian South America. Surrounded by vast open plains near Lake Titicaca, the structure rises from the earth as a carefully arranged rectangle of massive stone blocks, some weighing several tons. Despite centuries of exposure to wind, sun, and seismic activity, the layout still retains a sense of deliberate order and precision. Archaeologists generally place the development of Tiwanaku culture between roughly 300 BC and 1000 AD, with Kalasasaya serving as a central ceremonial space during its height. The structure is believed to have functioned as a gathering place for ritual activities, astronomical observation, and civic ceremonies. Its alignment with celestial events has been widely documented, particularly its relationship to the solstices and equinoxes. From within the platform, one of the most famous features rises into view: the Gateway of the Sun. This intricately carved monolith, adorned with geometric patterns and a central figure often associated with a solar deity, stands as one of the most iconic artifacts of Andean archaeology. Its symbolic imagery suggests a sophisticated understanding of cosmology, time, and possibly agricultural cycles. But Kalasasaya is more than a collection of stones arranged with astronomical precision. The construction techniques themselves raise questions. Massive blocks were transported and fitted together with a level of accuracy that continues to surprise researchers. Some stones appear to interlock in ways that leave minimal gaps, suggesting advanced knowledge of stoneworking methods. Yet the tools and methods used to achieve this remain only partially understood. How did a society operating in a high-altitude environment, with limited access to large timber resources and without metal tools comparable to later technologies, achieve such architectural precision? Mainstream archaeology proposes a combination of manpower, ingenuity, and long-term cultural development. These explanations are grounded in evidence, yet certain aspects of the construction still invite deeper inquiry. Equally compelling is the site's astronomical orientation. Shadows cast by key structures align with solar movements across the year. Some researchers suggest that Kalasasaya may have functioned as a sophisticated observatory, allowing its builders to track time and seasonal change with remarkable accuracy. Others propose that these alignments held symbolic meaning, linking earthly structures to cosmic order. The sky above Lake Titicaca adds another dimension to the experience. At this altitude, stars appear sharp and close, and the horizon stretches uninterrupted in all directions. It is not difficult to imagine why ancient observers might have looked upward with profound attention, interpreting celestial cycles as messages woven into the fabric of existence. Yet despite these interpretations, gaps remain. Much of Tiwanaku culture still exists only in fragments. While ruins and artifacts provide valuable insight, written records are scarce, leaving large portions of their worldview open to interpretation. What beliefs guided the builders of Kalasasaya? How did they understand their place within the vast Andean landscape? And what meanings did they assign to the carefully arranged stones beneath their feet? Over time, alternative theories have emerged around the site. Some propose that Kalasasaya was part of a much older tradition than currently accepted, possibly inherited from an earlier, more advanced culture. Others suggest that the site encodes knowledge that extends beyond astronomy, potentially reflecting broader systems of mathematics or cosmology that have not yet been fully decoded. These ideas remain outside mainstream consensus, yet they persist in discussions surrounding Tiwanaku's origins. There is also the question of memory. Oral traditions among Andean cultures preserve stories of great civilizations and transformative events that shaped the region long before recorded history. While these narratives do not always align directly with archaeological timelines, they contribute to a broader understanding of how ancient landscapes are remembered and reinterpreted over generations. Standing within Kalasasaya today, one is confronted not only by stone, but by silence. The platform extends outward in precise geometric form, yet its original voice has faded. What remains are alignments, carvings, and spatial arrangements that suggest intention, purpose, and meaning, though not always clarity. As researchers continue to study Tiwanaku and its monuments, Kalasasaya remains a focal point of both scientific inquiry and enduring curiosity. Its stones have witnessed centuries of change, yet they still guard unanswered questions. And as the sun continues its steady path above Lake Titicaca, one thought lingers quietly in the mind. How much of Kalasasaya's true purpose is still waiting, hidden within the stones, beneath the light of a sky that once guided its builders? As the last light fades from the high Andes and Kalasasaya's stone geometry dissolves into the vastness of altitude and sky, our journey returns once again to the edge of the Atlantic world. The air grows colder, heavier with moisture and salt. The landscape shifts into rolling green hills and ancient stone traditions shaped by wind, rain, and time. Here, in the Orkney archipelago off the northern coast of Scotland, another site waits in quiet stillness, one that carries the weight of thousands of years and a silence that feels almost intentional. On a gentle slope overlooking the Bay of Firth lies the Unstan chambered cairn, a Neolithic burial monument that appears modest at first glance. Partially covered by earth and surrounded by open grassland, it blends into the landscape so naturally that it can almost be missed entirely. Yet beneath this low mound lies a carefully constructed stone chamber, formed long before written history took shape in Britain. Archaeologists generally date the cairn to around 3000 BC, during a period when early farming communities spread across the Orkney Islands. These communities built some of the most remarkable Neolithic structures in northern Europe, including ceremonial complexes, stone circles, and communal burial sites. Unstan chambered cairn belongs to this wider tradition, yet it carries characteristics that set it apart from many of its contemporaries. The entrance leads into a narrow passage constructed from large, carefully placed slabs of stone. As one moves deeper inside, the space opens into a roughly circular chamber, divided by upright stone slabs into smaller compartments. These divisions suggest a level of organization that may have reflected how the dead were placed, or how rituals were conducted within the tomb. Within the chamber, archaeologists discovered human remains alongside finely crafted pottery, including distinctive Unstan ware, a type of decorated bowl associated with Orkney's Neolithic culture. The presence of both communal burials and carefully placed grave goods indicates that this was not simply a place of disposal, but a structured environment shaped by ritual practice and belief. And yet, despite the clarity of its physical structure, the purpose of Unstan chambered cairn remains only partially understood. Why divide a burial chamber into separate compartments within a single enclosed space? Was it a reflection of family groupings, social status, or something more symbolic in nature? Archaeology can identify patterns in placement and construction, but it cannot fully reconstruct the thoughts of those who built these spaces nearly 5,000 years ago. The cairn's orientation adds another layer of intrigue. Like many Neolithic monuments in Orkney, its design appears to interact subtly with the surrounding landscape. Light enters the passage in specific ways depending on the season, and the positioning of the entrance suggests deliberate attention to environmental conditions. Some researchers propose that such alignments may have been linked to seasonal cycles or ceremonial timings, though definitive conclusions remain elusive. The Orkney Islands themselves form a broader archaeological landscape that deepens the mystery. Nearby sites such as the Ring of Brodgar, the Stones of Stennis, and the settlement at Skara Brae reveal a complex Neolithic society capable of remarkable architectural coordination. Within this context, Unstan chambered cairn is not an isolated structure, but part of a wider cultural network that once transformed this northern landscape into a center of ritual and community life. Yet even within this broader framework, the cairn retains its own unanswered questions. One of the most compelling aspects of the site is the way it reflects both communal and individual treatment of the dead. The remains found inside suggest repeated use over time, with bodies added gradually rather than placed in a single event. This raises questions about how Neolithic communities in Orkney understood ancestry, memory, and continuity. Were these chambers seen as collective resting places for generations, or as spaces where the boundaries between life and death were actively maintained through ritual? Some interpretations suggest that chambered cairns like Unstan were not simply tombs, but part of a wider cosmological system. In this view, the architecture may have represented symbolic journeys, transitions, or transformations rather than straightforward burial practices. The act of entering the chamber, moving through narrow passages, and placing the dead within carefully arranged compartments could have held meanings that are no longer fully recoverable. More speculative perspectives have also emerged over time. A few researchers and independent theorists have suggested that Neolithic structures in Orkney may encode forms of knowledge related to astronomy, cycles of time, or even forgotten cultural systems shared across distant regions. While mainstream archaeology treats such ideas cautiously, they continue to surface in discussions surrounding the island's extraordinary concentration of ancient monuments. The pottery discovered within Unstan chambered cairn adds another subtle layer to the story. The decorated bowls, with their distinctive patterns and shapes, appear consistently across several burial sites in the region. Were these vessels purely functional offerings, or did their designs carry symbolic meanings now lost? The repetition of motifs suggests shared cultural understanding, yet the specifics remain beyond reach. Inside the chamber today, the atmosphere is strikingly quiet. The stone walls feel close, shaped by centuries of stillness. Light filters through the entrance in a narrow beam, illuminating sections of the floor where ancient remains once rested. It is a space defined not by grandeur, but by intimacy, an enclosed world shaped by human hands in a distant era. And yet, even in its quiet simplicity, the cairn resists complete interpretation. The people who built Unstan lived in a world without written explanation, leaving behind structures that must now be read like fragments of an unfinished language. Archaeology provides outlines, patterns, and materials, but not the full narrative. Each discovery clarifies something while leaving something else unresolved. As we stand within this ancient chamber, surrounded by stone that has held its shape for millennia, the questions remain. Why here, on this island? Why this precise arrangement of space and division? And what understanding of life, death, and continuity guided the hands that built it? Unstan chambered cairn endures not as a solved puzzle, but as a quiet presence in the landscape, one that continues to hold its secrets in the dark spaces between stone and memory. And as the wind moves across the Orkney hills above it, one thought persists. How much of what once happened within these walls has truly been lost, and how much still waits, unseen, beneath the earth. As the silence of Unstan chambered cairn lingers behind us, sealed within stone and memory on the windswept Orkney hills, the narrative shifts once again across oceans and hemispheres. The cold northern air gives way to something warmer, drier, and far more austere. The Atlantic fades into memory as the Pacific coastline of South America comes into view. Here, on the rugged desert edge of present-day Peru, another ancient site waits, its story partially written in stone and partially erased by time. Las Haldas emerges from the coastal desert like a faint imprint of civilization pressed into an unforgiving landscape. Located on a barren stretch of shoreline north of modern-day Lima, the site sits between the Pacific Ocean and the dry inland valleys of the Andean foothills. At first glance, the terrain appears almost lifeless, endless stretches of sand and stone, shaped by wind and salt. Yet within this harsh environment lies evidence of one of the earliest known coastal settlements in the Americas. Archaeologists date Las Haldas to roughly 1800 BC, placing it within a formative period of pre-Columbian development along the Peruvian coast. Unlike inland cultures that relied heavily on agriculture, the communities associated with Las Haldas appear to have built their lives around the ocean. Fishing, shellfish gathering, and maritime resources likely formed the foundation of their survival. Yet what remains at the site suggests something more structured than a simple fishing settlement. At the center of Las Haldas are large architectural platforms constructed from stone and earth. These structures rise from the desert floor in layered formations, suggesting ceremonial or communal use. Some researchers have proposed that these platforms may have functioned as early ceremonial centers, possibly linked to the broader emergence of complex societies along the Andean coast. What makes Las Haldas particularly intriguing is its apparent isolation. Unlike many ancient sites that developed near fertile river valleys, Las Haldas appears to have been established in a relatively marginal environment. There are no major rivers nearby to support large-scale agriculture. This raises fundamental questions about how and why such a settlement developed here. Was it primarily a coastal ritual center, a seasonal gathering place, or part of a wider network of early communities whose connections have yet to be fully understood? The architecture itself offers partial clues. The stone platforms are arranged with a degree of planning that suggests long-term occupation and coordinated construction efforts. While the materials are simple, their arrangement implies intentional design rather than spontaneous settlement. Some excavations have revealed traces of domestic activity, including hearths and food remains, indicating that people lived and worked here rather than using the site solely for ceremonial purposes. Yet the balance between daily life and ritual function remains uncertain. One of the most compelling aspects of Las Haldas is its relationship to other early Andean sites. It is often discussed alongside nearby coastal and inland settlements that collectively represent some of the earliest steps toward complex civilization in the region. However, the exact nature of these connections is still debated. Was Las Haldas part of a coordinated cultural expansion, or did it develop independently, shaped by local environmental conditions and maritime resources? The surrounding desert adds another dimension to its mystery. Today, the landscape appears almost empty, but thousands of years ago, environmental conditions may have been different. Shifts in climate, ocean currents, and resource availability could have played a significant role in shaping human occupation patterns along this coastline. Some researchers suggest that periods of greater marine productivity may have supported more extensive settlement than what the modern environment would suggest. Even so, Las Haldas does not fit neatly into simple narratives of development. There are gaps in the archaeological record that continue to challenge interpretation. Portions of the site remain only partially excavated, and erosion over millennia may have removed important evidence. Unlike more famous Andean centers, Las Haldas has not yielded large quantities of elaborate artifacts or monumental sculptures. Instead, its significance lies in its architecture, its location, and its place within a broader regional pattern that is still being pieced together. This absence of dramatic material culture has led to differing interpretations. Some scholars view Las Haldas as a modest but important coastal settlement, representing early stages of social organization along the Peruvian shoreline. Others suggest it may have held a more specialized role, possibly serving as a ceremonial gathering point for dispersed communities that moved between coastal and inland zones. More speculative perspectives have occasionally emerged, as they often do with sites that resist easy classification. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have proposed that early coastal settlements like Las Haldas may preserve traces of cultural systems that predate well-known Andean civilizations. Others suggest that the arrangement of platforms and open spaces could reflect symbolic or astronomical considerations that have yet to be fully decoded. These ideas remain unproven, but they reflect the broader sense that not all aspects of the site have been fully understood. Perhaps what makes Las Haldas most compelling is not what has been found, but what remains uncertain. Standing amid its stone platforms today, one is confronted by a landscape that seems to hold more absence than presence. The ocean stretches endlessly to the west, while the desert extends inland without interruption. Yet beneath this apparent emptiness lies evidence of human intention, of people who chose to build, gather, and live in a place that modern perception might consider marginal. Why here? What drew them to this narrow strip between sea and sand? And what meanings did they attach to the structures they left behind? Archaeology continues to uncover fragments of the answer, but the full story of Las Haldas remains incomplete. Like many ancient sites along this journey, it offers structure without final explanation, presence without complete narrative. And as the coastal wind moves across the desert ruins, carrying with it the sound of distant waves, one question quietly persists. How much of Las Haldas has truly been revealed, and how much still lies hidden beneath the shifting sands of time? As the desert winds of Las Haldas fade into memory, carrying with them the silence of ancient coastal platforms and unanswered questions, our journey turns once more toward the Atlantic edge of Europe. The air grows cooler again, heavier with mist and moisture. Green hills rise from the landscape, shaped by rain and time rather than sand and sun. Here, overlooking the rugged coastline of Western Ireland, another ancient presence dominates the horizon, quiet, immense, and still deeply enigmatic. Knocknarea stands as a solitary limestone hill rising above the plains of County Sligo. From a distance, it appears almost unnatural in its symmetry, a single massive formation set apart from the surrounding landscape. Its slopes are covered in grass and scattered rock, but its summit holds something far more striking: a vast stone cairn known as Queen Maeve's grave. Even from the ground below, the mound is visible, a crown of stone resting atop the hill like a marker placed deliberately upon the land. Archaeologists generally date the cairn to the Neolithic period, around 3000 BC, a time when early farming communities in Ireland constructed monumental tombs and ceremonial structures across the landscape. The cairn itself is enormous, built from thousands of stones carefully gathered and stacked over generations. No written records explain its purpose, yet its scale alone suggests it held profound significance for the people who built it. The climb to the summit of Knocknarea is gradual but persistent. As one ascends, the view expands across Sligo Bay, the Ox Mountains, and the distant Atlantic horizon. The cairn grows larger with each step, until it dominates the entire skyline. Up close, its structure is less uniform than it first appears. Stones of varying sizes form an irregular yet deliberate mass, shaped by human hands long ago. At the heart of local tradition lies the figure of Queen Maeve, a legendary ruler associated with the ancient epic cycles of Ireland. According to folklore, She is said to be buried beneath the cairn, seated upright and facing her enemies in the direction of Ulster. While there is no archaeological evidence confirming this narrative, the association between the cairn and myth has endured for centuries, blending landscape and legend into a single enduring identity. But what was Knocknarea before it became part of legend? Archaeological interpretation suggests that the cairn functioned as a communal burial monument, possibly marking the resting place of important individuals or serving as a focal point for ritual activity. Excavations and surveys of similar Neolithic sites across Ireland indicate that such structures often held collective rather than individual significance. They were not simply graves, but spaces where communities engaged with ideas of ancestry, memory, and continuity. Yet, Knocknarea remains unusual even within this broader context. Its scale is extraordinary. The sheer volume of stone used in its construction implies sustained effort over an extended period. How did Neolithic communities organize the labor required to build such a structure without centralized authority as understood in later societies? Mainstream archaeology proposes cooperative social systems, where shared belief and communal obligation drove large-scale construction projects. These explanations are consistent with evidence from other Neolithic monuments, yet the emotional and symbolic motivations behind such effort remain difficult to fully reconstruct. The cairn's position on the summit of a prominent hill adds another layer of complexity. From its peak, the monument is visible across a vast portion of the surrounding region. Was this visibility intentional? Did the builders seek to mark territory, create a spiritual landmark, or align the structure with specific celestial or environmental features? Some researchers suggest that prominent hilltop cairns may have functioned as territorial markers or ceremonial centers, visible symbols of community identity embedded within the landscape. Others propose more symbolic interpretations. The act of placing a burial monument on elevated ground could represent a desire to bring the dead closer to the sky, the horizon, or the passage of time itself. In this view, Knocknarea may have been part of a broader Neolithic worldview in which landscapes were not passive settings but active participants in ritual and meaning, and yet much remains uncertain. Unlike some archaeological sites that reveal multiple phases of occupation or clear sequences of development, Knocknarea offers limited direct evidence beneath its massive cairn. Excavation is restricted in part due to preservation concerns, meaning that much of its internal structure remains unexamined. What lies beneath the surface is still largely unknown. Is there a central chamber, multiple burials, or something entirely different from what is currently assumed? This absence of definitive exploration leaves space for speculation. Over time, Knocknarea has attracted a range of interpretations beyond mainstream archaeology. Some suggest that its construction may reflect astronomical alignments, possibly linked to seasonal cycles or solar events observed from the summit. Others propose that the cairn may represent a symbolic connection between earth and sky, a physical expression of cosmological beliefs that structured Neolithic life. More speculative ideas occasionally go further, suggesting that such monumental sites across Ireland could form part of a broader interconnected system of ancient knowledge. While these theories lack archaeological confirmation, they persist in cultural imagination, often inspired by the striking scale and precision of Neolithic monuments. Local folklore adds yet another dimension. The association with Queen Maeve transforms the cairn from a prehistoric burial structure into a mythological landmark. Stories passed down through generations describe her burial in vivid terms, reinforcing the idea that Knocknarea is not only a physical monument, but also a narrative space where history and legend overlap. Whether these traditions preserve distant memories or later reinterpretations of the landscape remains an open question. Standing near the summit today, the experience is marked by contrast. On one side, the vast Atlantic stretches toward the horizon. On the other, the rolling hills of Sligo unfold beneath shifting clouds. At the center of it all sits the cairn, silent, immovable, and unresolved. Wind moves across its surface, carrying centuries of weather, memory, and interpretation. Archaeology continues to study Knocknarea, but many of its most fundamental questions remain unanswered. The identity of those buried within, the exact rituals performed there, and the deeper meaning of its construction are still subjects of ongoing investigation. Each layer of understanding reveals something new while preserving the mystery beneath. And so, as the light shifts over the stone mound and the landscape falls into quiet reflection, one question endures. Was Knocknarea simply a burial monument built by an ancient community? Or does it represent something more complex, a message in stone whose full meaning has yet to be understood? As the winds sweep across the summit of Knocknarea and the silent cairn of Queen Maeve fades into the Atlantic mist, our journey shifts once again across vast distances. The green hills of Ireland dissolve into memory, replaced by a dry coastal valley where desert and ocean meet in quiet tension. Here, in present-day Peru, lies a landscape that holds one of the earliest known urban civilizations in the Americas, an ancient city that challenges assumptions about the origins of complex society. Caral emerges from the Soup Valley like a revelation carved into earth and time. Surrounded by arid hills and distant mountain silhouettes, the site rests in a region where vegetation is sparse and rainfall almost non-existent. At first glance, the terrain appears harsh and unforgiving. Yet within this desert basin lies evidence of a thriving civilization that dates back to roughly 3000 BC, making Caral one of the oldest known urban centers in the Western Hemisphere. The city unfolds across a broad expanse of terraces, pyramids, sunken plazas, and residential clusters. Unlike later civilizations that would dominate the Andean world, Caral shows no signs of defensive walls or weapons of war. This absence has led researchers to propose that it may have developed as a largely peaceful society, organized around trade, agriculture, and ceremonial life rather than military expansion. Massive platform mounds dominate the landscape. These stepped structures rise from the desert floor in carefully constructed layers of stone and earth. Some are aligned with astronomical features, suggesting that celestial observation may have played a role in their design. Within these structures, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of ritual activity, including offerings, musical instruments, and complex architectural arrangements. Among the most intriguing discoveries are ancient flutes made from pelican and condor bones, suggesting that music may have been an important part of ceremonial life. The presence of such instruments hints at gatherings where sound, rhythm, and collective participation shaped social and spiritual experience. What meanings were carried through these melodies? Were they expressions of devotion, communication with the cosmos, or something else entirely? Caral's location raises equally compelling questions. Situated inland but connected to coastal resources through trade networks, the city appears to have been part of a broader system linking marine and agricultural economies. Fish remains found at the site indicate exchange with coastal communities, while cotton cultivated in the valley may have been traded for maritime goods. This interconnectedness suggests a sophisticated understanding of regional resource distribution. Yet despite its complexity, Caral presents a striking absence of certain elements commonly associated with ancient urban centers. There is no evidence of fortifications, no clear signs of armed conflict, no depictions of warfare in its art or architecture. This has led some researchers to propose that Caral may represent a different model of civilization, one in which cooperation and ceremonial organization played a more central role than conquest or domination. If true, what might this reveal about the diversity of early human societies? The architectural layout of the city also invites deeper consideration. The arrangement of pyramids and plazas appears to follow a deliberate spatial logic, possibly related to social hierarchy or ritual movement. Large circular sunken plazas, in particular, seem designed for gatherings that brought communities together. Standing within these spaces today, one can still sense the scale of collective activity that once animated the city. But Caral's most profound mystery may not lie in what is present, but in what is absent. No written language has been found at the site. Unlike later Andean civilizations that developed systems of record-keeping, Caral leaves no decipherable texts to explain its beliefs, governance, or worldview. Archaeologists must rely entirely on material remains to reconstruct its story. Architecture becomes language. Objects become memory. Yet the inner thoughts of its people remain beyond reach. This silence has opened space for interpretation. Some scholars suggest that Caral may represent an early stage in the development of complex Andean civilization, a foundation upon which later cultures would build. Others view it as a unique experiment in social organization, one that developed independently and followed a different trajectory than more familiar historical models. Its lack of militarization, in particular, continues to provoke discussion about alternative pathways in human development. More speculative ideas occasionally emerge at the edges of interpretation. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have suggested that Caral's precise architectural planning and astronomical alignments may reflect knowledge systems that are not yet fully understood. Others propose that its sudden emergence as a complex society raises questions about the pace of cultural development in ancient times. These ideas remain unverified, yet they persist in discussions surrounding early urbanization in the Americas. Environmental factors also play a role in the city's story. Changes in climate and water availability in the Soup Valley may have influenced Caral's development and eventual transformation. Rivers that once sustained agriculture could have shifted over time, requiring adaptation from its inhabitants. While the site does not show evidence of sudden collapse, its long-term trajectory remains only partially understood. Walking through Caral today, the silence is profound. The pyramids stand against the desert sky, shaped by centuries of wind and light. There are no inscriptions to explain their purpose, no surviving narratives from those who built them. Only form, space, and structure remain, silent witnesses to a society that once organized itself around these monumental spaces. And yet, within that silence, questions continue to surface. What beliefs guided the construction of this city? How did its people understand their place within the vast desert and the surrounding world? And why did one of the earliest urban societies in the Americas emerge here, in a place that appears at first glance so unlikely to sustain it? Caral remains a cornerstone of archaeological understanding, yet it resists complete explanation. It stands not as a solved chapter of history, but as an open record, one that continues to invite interpretation, reflection, and wonder. And as the desert wind moves through its ancient plazas, carrying dust across stone platforms built 5 millennia ago, one question lingers in the stillness. How much of Caral's story has been uncovered, and how much still rests beneath the shifting sands of time? As the silence of Caral settles over the Peruvian desert, its pyramids still standing like questions carved into stone, our journey shifts once more across continents and centuries. The dry wind fades, replaced by the heavy, humid air of the North Atlantic reaching into the Florida Keys. Here, beneath a subtropical sky, another structure rises that seems to belong to a different kind of history altogether. Not ancient in the traditional sense, yet no less enigmatic, it stands as a monument that continues to challenge assumptions about what one individual might accomplish alone. Coral Castle emerges from the landscape of Homestead, Florida, like a silent fortress built from another world. Massive limestone blocks, some weighing several tons, are arranged into walls, towers, gates, and furniture-like structures with an almost unsettling precision. The pale stone contrasts sharply with the surrounding vegetation, giving the entire complex an otherworldly stillness, as if time itself has paused around it. The site was created in the early 20th century by a single man, Edward Leedskalnin, a Latvian immigrant who worked in isolation for decades. According to historical records, he began construction in the 1920s and continued until his death in 1951. Working mostly at night and refusing assistance, he gradually assembled what would become Coral Castle, initially in Florida City before relocating it to its current location. Leedskalnin was a small, quiet figure in local accounts, often described as reclusive and deeply private. He left behind few detailed explanations of his methods, only scattered writings and cryptic references to magnetic currents and the forces governing matter. These fragments have fueled decades of curiosity about how he managed to move and shape such enormous stones without recorded heavy machinery. At Coral Castle today, the engineering details are striking. A massive rotating gate, weighing several tons, once turned so smoothly that a child could move it with a touch. Perfectly shaped stone blocks are stacked with minimal visible mortar. Monolithic slabs are carved into functional forms, tables, chairs, and even a throne-like seat aligned with astronomical sightlines. The precision suggests careful planning and advanced understanding of leverage, balance, and stonework. Yet the central question remains unchanged. How did he do it alone? Mainstream explanations point toward mechanical ingenuity. Leedskalnin is believed to have used simple but effective tools such as pulleys, tripods, and hoists. Some researchers have reconstructed plausible systems using contemporary equipment of the time, demonstrating that with sufficient time and knowledge of physics, large stones can indeed be moved by a single determined individual. In this view, Coral Castle is not a mystery of the impossible, but a testament to patience, experimentation, and mechanical creativity. Still, the absence of direct documentation leaves gaps in the story. Leedskalnin himself was notoriously secretive. He claimed to understand the principles behind the construction of the pyramids, and hinted that he had discovered a way to manipulate weight or gravity through magnetic principles. These statements are often interpreted metaphorically or philosophically, yet they continue to spark curiosity. What exactly did he mean by magnetic currents? Was he referring to literal physical forces, or something more abstract in his personal worldview? The lack of witnesses adds another layer of uncertainty. Much of the construction took place at night, out of public view. Neighbors occasionally reported hearing strange sounds or seeing movements in the dark, but few details were ever confirmed. Over time, the secrecy surrounding the work became part of the structure's identity itself. As Coral Castle took shape, its design began to reveal patterns that have invited interpretation. Some alignments appear to correspond with celestial events. Certain stones are positioned in ways that interact with sunlight during solstices and equinoxes. Whether these alignments were intentional or coincidental remains a subject of debate. The architectural layout also suggests symbolic intent. The entrance gate, the central tower, and various carved elements seem to follow a deliberate spatial arrangement. Was this purely functional, or did Leedskalnin embed personal meaning into the geometry of the site? Without written explanation, the answers remain speculative. Over the decades, Coral Castle has attracted a wide range of interpretations. Some see it as an extraordinary example of human ingenuity, a demonstration that determination and simple physics can achieve what initially seems impossible. Others view it through a more enigmatic lens, suggesting that Leedskalnin may have possessed insights into natural forces that were unconventional for his time. A smaller group of theories ventures further, proposing that he discovered unknown principles related to energy or vibration. These ideas remain outside scientific consensus, yet they persist in popular imagination. There is also the psychological dimension. Leedskalnin's isolation, his refusal to reveal his methods, and his lifelong dedication to a single monumental task suggest a deeply personal motivation. Some accounts suggest he built Coral Castle as a tribute to a lost romantic relationship. If true, the structure becomes not just an engineering feat, but an emotional expression carved into stone. But even this interpretation does not fully resolve the mystery. The precision of certain stone cuts, the apparent ease with which massive blocks were positioned, and the overall coherence of the design continue to invite questions. Could all of this truly have been achieved by one man working alone with limited resources? Or does the story of Coral Castle contain elements that have been misunderstood, exaggerated, or simply lost over time? Today, visitors walk through the site surrounded by silence, broken only by wind moving across limestone surfaces. The structures remain intact, their purpose partly understood and partly uncertain. The rotating gate still moves, the stone furniture still rests in place, and the entire complex continues to stand as a physical contradiction, both explainable and inexplicable at once. Perhaps Coral Castle is less about what was built, and more about what cannot be easily explained. It sits at the intersection of engineering, isolation, memory, and myth, refusing to settle into a single interpretation. And as the light shifts across its pale stone walls in the Florida sun, one question remains suspended in the air. Was Coral Castle simply the product of extraordinary human ingenuity? Or does it still hold a deeper secret hidden within its carefully placed stones? As the quiet geometry of Coral Castle fades into memory, its silent limestone forms standing like questions carved by a solitary hand, our journey turns once more across the Atlantic. The humid air of Florida gives way to the open skies of East Africa, where the landscape stretches into rolling grasslands, scattered rock formations, and distant horizons that seem to dissolve into heat and light. Here, near the shores of Lake Victoria in present-day Kenya, another remarkable sight emerges from the earth, shaped not by a single individual, but by generations whose full story is still only partially understood. Thimlich Ohinga rises from the landscape as a vast complex of dry stone enclosures, walls, and circular settlements. At first glance, it appears almost organic, as if the stones themselves naturally gathered into formation over time. Yet closer inspection reveals deliberate construction. Carefully stacked blocks, interlocking without mortar, forming thick defensive walls that curve and connect across a wide area. The scale is immediately striking. This is not a small village enclosure, but a fortified landscape of stone architecture spreading across the region. Archaeologists generally date the earliest phases of Thimlich Ohinga to around the 15th century AD, though oral traditions suggest earlier occupation. The site is associated with communities linked to the Luo peoples and possibly earlier groups who inhabited the Lake Victoria basin. Over time, it functioned as a settlement system, combining residential areas, livestock enclosures, and communal spaces within its massive stone boundaries. The walls themselves are the most defining feature. Built without mortar, they rely on precise placement and balance, a technique that has allowed many sections to survive for centuries, despite exposure to weather and time. Some walls stand several meters high and extend for long distances, enclosing multiple interconnected compounds. Narrow passageways lead between these spaces, suggesting a structured organization of movement and activity within the settlement. Yet despite its physical presence, Thimlich Ohinga resists simple interpretation. Why was such extensive effort invested in constructing these massive enclosures? One widely accepted explanation is defense. The walls likely served to protect communities and livestock from raids and environmental pressures. In a region shaped by shifting social dynamics, fortified settlements would have offered security and stability. This interpretation aligns with broader patterns observed in similar stone enclosures across East Africa. However, the complexity of the site suggests additional layers of meaning. Within the enclosures, archaeologists have identified areas that appear to have served domestic, social, and possibly ceremonial functions. Evidence of hearths, storage pits, and livestock pens indicates that daily life unfolded within these stone boundaries. Yet the spatial arrangement of certain areas raises questions about whether some sections held symbolic or ritual significance beyond practical use. The cultural context of Thimlich Ohinga is deeply connected to oral history. Local traditions preserve accounts of early communities who built and inhabited these stone structures, often describing periods of migration, conflict, and adaptation. These narratives, passed down through generations, provide valuable insight into how the site has been remembered, even if they do not always align directly with archaeological timelines. One recurring theme in these traditions is the idea of refuge. Thimlich Ohinga is often described as a place of safety, a communal stronghold where groups gathered during uncertain times. The thick walls and enclosed design reinforce this interpretation, but they also raise further questions. Was protection the only purpose, or did the architecture also reflect social organization, identity, or spiritual boundaries? As researchers examine the site, they encounter both clarity and uncertainty. The construction techniques are well understood in principle. Dry stone masonry is a widely documented method used in various regions of the world. Yet the scale and coordination required to build Thimlich Ohinga suggest a high degree of social organization. Multiple generations likely contributed to its expansion and maintenance. This raises questions about leadership structures, communal decision-making, and the cultural values that sustained such long-term construction. In some areas, the arrangement of enclosures appears unusually precise. Circular patterns, connecting walls, and aligned entrances suggest intentional design choices that go beyond simple functional layout. Were these arrangements purely practical, or did they reflect deeper social or symbolic frameworks? Archaeology can identify structure, but the meaning behind structure often remains just beyond reach. The site's relationship with the surrounding landscape also adds another dimension. Positioned in a region historically shaped by trade routes, migration, and interaction between different cultural groups, Thimlich Ohinga may have functioned as part of a broader network of settlements. Its location near Lake Victoria would have provided access to water, fish resources, and transportation routes, making it strategically significant. Yet even with these interpretations, gaps remain in the historical record. Unlike some ancient civilizations that left written accounts, the builders of Thimlich Ohinga did not leave inscriptions or texts that explain their intentions. The stones themselves are the primary witnesses. They record only form, not voice. As a result, much of what is known must be reconstructed through archaeology, oral tradition, and comparative analysis. This absence of direct explanation has also opened space for broader speculation. Some researchers and independent theorists have suggested that the precision and scale of the stonework may indicate influences or knowledge systems that extended beyond what is currently understood about the region's pre-colonial societies. Others propose that the site may have held ceremonial or cosmological significance in addition to its defensive role, possibly reflecting a worldview in which physical boundaries and spiritual boundaries were closely connected. These ideas remain outside mainstream consensus, yet they persist in discussions surrounding the site's deeper meaning. Even the name Ohinga, meaning large fortress in the local language, reflects how later generations perceived the structure as something imposing, protective, and significant beyond ordinary settlement life. Today, Thimlich Ohinga stands quietly in the Kenyan landscape, surrounded by grasslands and open sky. Wildlife moves through the region, and the stone walls blend into the natural environment, yet their presence remains unmistakable. Time has softened their edges, but not erased their form. They continue to define space, memory, and landscape in equal measure. Walking through the enclosures today, one is struck by the sense of continuity. These stones have witnessed centuries of human activity, building, living, protecting, and adapting. Yet they do not speak directly of what was believed, feared, or understood by those who built them. They preserve structure without narrative, architecture without explanation. And so the questions remain. What inspired the creation of such enduring stone enclosures? How did communities coordinate their construction across generations? And what meanings, practical, social, or spiritual, were embedded within these carefully arranged walls? Thimlich Ohinga endures not as a solved chapter of history, but as an open landscape of interpretation. Its stones continue to hold their silence, inviting reflection rather than resolution. And as the wind moves through its ancient corridors, one thought lingers. How much of this vast stone enclosure has truly been understood, and how much still waits, hidden within the quiet geometry of the past? As the stone enclosures of Thimlich Ohinga fade into the open horizons of East Africa, their quiet geometry dissolving into grass and wind, our journey shifts once more across continents. The air grows drier, warmer, carrying the faint heat of an ancient desert landscape. In the vast basin of the American Southwest, where time seems etched into every grain of sand, another structure rises, weathered, silent, and deeply enigmatic. Casa Grande ruins stands in present-day Arizona, where the desert stretches outward in muted tones of ochre and stone. At the center of this protected site rises a massive earthen structure, its walls worn yet still imposing despite centuries of exposure. Known as Casa Grande, or Great House, the building is one of the most remarkable surviving structures of the ancient Sonoran desert cultures. Constructed by the Hohokam people, the structure is generally dated to around the early 14th century AD. Built from caliche soil, a natural mixture of clay, sand, and calcium carbonate hardened by time, it reflects a sophisticated understanding of local materials and environmental adaptation. The walls are thick, layered, and carefully compacted, allowing them to endure harsh desert conditions that would have eroded less durable construction. From a distance, Casa Grande appears almost monolithic. Its height and rectangular form rise unexpectedly from the desert floor, as if placed deliberately within an otherwise open landscape. Surrounding it are remnants of canals, platforms, and smaller structures, indicating that this was once part of a larger settlement system rather than an isolated building. Archaeologists widely believe that Casa Grande served as a central structure within a complex agricultural society. The Hohokam developed one of the most extensive irrigation networks in prehistoric North America, diverting water from the Gila and Salt rivers to sustain crops in an otherwise arid environment. This achievement alone speaks to a high level of social organization, engineering skill, and long-term planning. Yet the purpose of Casa Grande itself remains only partially understood. The structure contains multiple stories and carefully aligned openings. One of its most striking features is a series of windows and interior apertures that appear to align with solar events. At certain times of the year, light passes through these openings in ways that suggest intentional design. Some researchers propose that the building may have functioned as an astronomical observatory, used to track seasonal cycles essential for agriculture and ceremonial life. Others suggest a more complex interpretation. Casa Grande may have served multiple functions simultaneously: a civic center, ceremonial space, and astronomical marker combined within a single monumental structure. In societies without written records, such multifunctional architecture is not unusual. Yet the precise balance between practical use and symbolic meaning remains open to interpretation. Standing within the surrounding desert today, the silence is striking. There are no modern sounds beyond wind and distant movement of wildlife. The structure itself feels like a fixed point in a landscape that otherwise appears fluid and shifting. This contrast raises a fundamental question. Why build such a monumental structure in a place that offers so little visual permanence? The Hohokam people clearly mastered adaptation to their environment. Their canal systems extended for miles, transforming desert into productive farmland. Archaeological evidence shows that they maintained extensive trade networks with neighboring regions, exchanging goods such as shells, ceramics, and agricultural products. Casa Grande may have stood at the center of these networks, serving as a landmark of coordination and cultural identity. But even with these insights, gaps remain. There are no surviving written records from the Hohokam that explain the meaning of Casa Grande. Everything known about its purpose must be inferred from architecture, spatial arrangement, and comparison with other regional sites. This leaves room for multiple interpretations, each supported by fragments of evidence but none fully complete. Some researchers have focused on the building's alignment with celestial bodies. The positioning of windows and walls suggests possible tracking of solar cycles, particularly those important for planting and harvesting seasons. Was Casa Grande primarily a scientific instrument embedded within architecture, or did its astronomical features carry symbolic meaning tied to spiritual beliefs? Other interpretations emphasize its role within a broader ceremonial landscape. The surrounding platform mounds and canals suggest a society deeply connected to both water management and ritual organization. In this view, Casa Grande may have represented a convergence point where practical governance and spiritual observance intersected. More speculative ideas occasionally emerge in discussions of the site. Some suggest that the precision of its alignments and the scale of its construction reflect knowledge systems that are not yet fully understood in the context of prehistoric North American cultures. Others propose that Casa Grande may preserve traces of a symbolic language encoded in architecture, one that has not survived in any readable form. These interpretations remain outside mainstream archaeology, yet they continue to appear whenever the site is examined through a broader lens of ancient possibility. Time has not been entirely kind to Casa Grande. Weathering, erosion, and centuries of exposure have softened its edges, yet its presence remains unmistakable. Early preservation efforts in the 20th century helped stabilize the structure, recognizing its significance long before many other ancient sites in the region received similar attention. Today, it stands within a protective structure that shields it from further deterioration, allowing researchers and visitors to observe it in relative stability. And yet, protection does not equal understanding. The building remains a silent witness to a civilization that once transformed desert into a thriving landscape of canals, fields, and settlements. It reflects ingenuity, adaptation, and coordination on a remarkable scale. But its deeper meaning, its role within the cultural, spiritual, or scientific framework of the Hohokam world, remains only partially revealed. As the sun moves across the Arizona sky, casting shifting shadows through its ancient openings, Casa Grande seems to mark time itself. Light enters, passes through, and exits in cycles that have repeated for centuries. Whether these patterns were fully understood by its builders, or whether they held meanings now lost, is a question that continues to echo through the silence. And so, as we stand before this weathered monument in the desert, one thought persists. Was Casa Grande simply a masterwork of environmental engineering and astronomical awareness? Or does it still hold a deeper purpose, hidden within its silent walls, waiting for time to reveal what human memory has forgotten? As the desert silence of Casa Grande fades into the heat-hazed horizon of the American Southwest, our journey moves once more across oceans and continents. The dry wind gives way to heavy tropical air, thick with moisture and the scent of dense rainforest. Somewhere in Southeast Asia, where rivers carve through endless green and time feels layered beneath vegetation, another vast ancient landscape begins to emerge, one that remains partially hidden beneath earth, roots, and centuries of overgrowth. Muaro Jambi lies in present-day Indonesia, along the banks of the Batangkari River in Sumatra. At first glance, the region appears like any other stretch of tropical lowland forest, lush, humid, and alive with sound. Yet beneath this living surface rests one of Southeast Asia's most extensive and least fully understood archaeological complexes, a sprawling network of brick temples, earthen mounds, canals, and ancient settlement structures. The site extends across a wide area, far larger than what casual observation might suggest. More than a dozen major temple structures have been identified, along with numerous smaller mounds and remnants of ancient water systems. Unlike the towering stone monuments of other ancient civilizations, Muaro Jambi is built primarily from red bricks, carefully stacked and shaped, forming low but enduring structures that blend into the surrounding forest. Archaeologists generally date the peak development of Muaro Jambi to between the 7th and 13th centuries AD, a period when the Srivijaya maritime empire exerted influence across much of Southeast Asia. It is widely believed that Muaro Jambi functioned as a major Buddhist learning and religious center during this time. The layout of the complex, combined with inscriptions and stylistic analysis, suggests connections to broader networks of trade, culture, and spiritual exchange stretching across the region. Within the forest, temple foundations rise quietly from the ground. Some structures remain partially restored, their brick forms revealing stepped platforms and symmetrical layouts. Others are more fragmented, their outlines visible only through subtle elevation changes in the earth. Between them, ancient canals still trace faint lines through the landscape, suggesting that water management played a significant role in the organization of the settlement. Yet despite this growing understanding, Muaro Jambi continues to resist full interpretation. One of the most intriguing aspects of the site is its sheer scale. Covering approximately 3,000 hectares, it is far larger than what is typically expected of a single religious center. This raises questions about its original function. Was it primarily a monastic complex, a center of learning, or part of a broader urban system that has yet to be fully uncovered? Historical records from Chinese and Arab travelers describe powerful maritime kingdoms in the region during this period, often emphasizing trade, religion, and vast networks of exchange. Some scholars suggest that Muaro Jambi may have been one of the key inland hubs connected to these maritime routes, linking river-based transportation with oceanic commerce. If so, its importance may have extended far beyond its religious role. Still, many details remain uncertain. The arrangement of temples within the complex appears both ordered and dispersed. Certain structures are aligned in ways that suggest intentional planning, possibly reflecting cosmological or ritual principles. Others seem more isolated, separated by distances that do not immediately follow a clear pattern. What determined the placement of these structures? Was it purely functional, or did symbolic geography play a role in shaping the landscape? Inside some of the restored temples, archaeologists have found evidence of Buddhist influence, including iconography and architectural forms associated with Mahayana traditions. This supports the widely accepted view that Muaro Jambi was a significant center of Buddhist scholarship and practice. Some interpretations suggest that monks from across Asia may have traveled here, contributing to an intellectual network that connected India, China, and Southeast Asia. But even this broader picture leaves gaps. Much of Muaro Jambi remains unexcavated, still hidden beneath dense vegetation and layers of sediment deposited over centuries of flooding and environmental change. The tropical climate, while sustaining life, has also accelerated decay, making preservation and interpretation more challenging. What remains visible today may represent only a fraction of the original complex. This uncertainty has allowed space for alternative perspectives to emerge. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have suggested that Muaro Jambi's scale and complexity may indicate a level of urban development that is not yet fully recognized in early Southeast Asian history. Others propose that the site could be part of a much larger, interconnected system of settlements along the river networks of Sumatra, one that has been fragmented by time, environmental change, and shifting political landscapes. There are also more speculative ideas that interpret the site's layout through symbolic or cosmological frameworks, suggesting that the arrangement of temples and waterways may reflect a mapping of spiritual concepts onto physical space. While such interpretations are not widely accepted in academic circles, they continue to surface in discussions surrounding ancient sacred geography. Even the relationship between Muaro Jambi and the surrounding environment raises questions. The integration of canals and river access suggests careful adaptation to seasonal flooding and transportation needs. Yet how these systems were originally engineered and how they were maintained over generations remains only partially understood. Did the landscape itself guide the development of the complex, or was it extensively reshaped by human intervention over time? Walking through Muaro Jambi today feels like moving through a space where nature and history are continuously overlapping. Roots wrap around ancient bricks, trees rise from temple platforms, water flows through channels that may have once supported ritual cleansing, transport, or irrigation. The boundaries between constructed space and natural environment blur into one another, making it difficult to distinguish where one ends and the other begins. And in this blurred boundary, the questions persist. What kind of society built a complex of this scale deep within a riverine forest? How did it function across centuries of political and environmental change? And why does so much of its structure remain only partially revealed, as if still waiting for the rest of its story to be uncovered? Muaro Jambi stands today not as a completed narrative, but as an unfolding one, its temples and waterways offering fragments of meaning without final explanation. The forest continues to reclaim what was built, yet it never fully erases it. Instead, it preserves it in a different form, one that is quieter, more concealed, and perhaps more mysterious than before. And as the river continues its slow passage through the landscape, carrying with it echoes of trade, ritual, and forgotten footsteps, one question lingers in the humid air. How much of Muaro Jambi has truly been discovered, and how much still lies hidden beneath the living green of Sumatra? As the forested temples of Muaro Jambi dissolve into the humid silence of Sumatra, their brick forms slowly reclaimed by vegetation and time, our journey shifts once more across the vast spine of the Andes. The air thins again. The landscape rises sharply. Rivers carve deep valleys into stone, and the horizon opens into a world shaped by altitude and ancient memory. Here, near the shores of Lake Titicaca in southern Peru, another site emerges, one that seems less like a constructed monument and more like a threshold cut directly into the earth itself. Aramu Muru stands carved into a massive red sandstone formation on the remote high plateau of the Andean highlands. At first glance, it appears deceptively simple. A flat rock face, interrupted by a perfectly symmetrical doorway-like opening, framed by clean geometric edges. There are no visible structures surrounding it, no remnants of walls or settlements in the immediate vicinity. It stands alone, silent and precise, as if something or someone once began a construction that was never completed, or perhaps was never meant to be understood in conventional terms. The feature is often referred to as the Gate of the Gods in local tradition. According to accounts passed down through oral narratives, Aramu Muru is linked to ancient priestly figures and ceremonial journeys into the spiritual world. The site is said to have been used in rituals involving passage between realms, though no written records from the pre-Columbian period confirm its exact function. Archaeologically, the broader region around Lake Titicaca is well known. It was home to several advanced Andean cultures long before the rise of the Inca, including the Tiwanaku civilization, whose monumental stone architecture and ceremonial complexes demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of engineering astronomy, and ritual space. In this wider context, Aramu Muru is often discussed as a peripheral or symbolic site, possibly connected to regional belief systems that predate Inca expansion. Yet unlike many nearby archaeological locations, Aramu Muru does not contain obvious architectural extensions, habitation remains, or decorative carvings. Its defining feature is the doorway itself, smoothly cut, recessed into the rock, and framed with near-perfect symmetry. There are shallow grooves carved into the surface, but no inscriptions or iconography that clearly indicate cultural origin or purpose. This absence of explanatory detail is part of what has made the site so compelling. Mainstream interpretations generally approach Aramu Muru with caution. Some researchers suggest that it may represent an unfinished quarrying attempt, where ancient stoneworkers began shaping a structure that was later abandoned. Others propose that it could be a ceremonial niche or symbolic portal, possibly used in ritual practices associated with local religious traditions. In these interpretations, the doorway is not meant to be functional in a literal sense, but rather symbolic, an architectural expression of transition, passage, or cosmological belief. However, even these explanations leave certain questions unresolved. The precision of the carving raises curiosity. The doorway is not irregular or eroded in a way that suggests incomplete abandonment due to accident or collapse. Instead, it appears deliberately shaped, with clean edges and a consistent geometric form. If it is unfinished, what halted its creation? And if it is complete, what purpose did it serve? Local oral traditions provide a different layer of interpretation. Stories describe Aramu Muru as a place where ancient priests or spiritual figures interacted with forces beyond ordinary perception. One narrative speaks of a priest who escaped oppression by passing through the doorway and never returning. While such accounts belong to the realm of mythology rather than documented history, they reflect the enduring cultural significance of the site within regional memory. Some researchers have also pointed to possible astronomical or energetic alignments in the surrounding landscape. The high plateau of Lake Titicaca is known for its dramatic skies, where celestial movement is highly visible due to the altitude and clarity of the atmosphere. Could the placement of Aramu Muru relate in some way to solar, lunar, or stellar cycles? No definitive evidence has confirmed such theories, but the idea continues to appear in discussions surrounding Andean sacred geography. More speculative interpretations go further. Outside mainstream archaeology, some suggest that Aramu Muru may represent a symbolic or even functional portal in a metaphysical sense, an idea rooted in modern esoteric traditions rather than empirical evidence. Others propose that the site may preserve traces of an unknown architectural tradition that used rock-cut forms in ways not yet fully understood. These perspectives remain unverified, yet they persist because the structure itself resists easy classification. Part of the mystery lies in its isolation. Unlike many Andean ceremonial sites, Aramu Muru is not part of an extensive visible complex. There are no obvious supporting structures, no clear urban context, and no extensive archaeological layering surrounding it. It exists as a singular carved feature in the rock, separated from the kinds of material remains that typically help define function and chronology. This raises a broader question. Was Aramu Muru always meant to stand alone? Or is it only one surviving fragment of a larger landscape that has since been lost to time, erosion, or cultural transformation? Geological studies confirm that the sandstone formation itself is natural, shaped over millions of years by wind and water erosion. The doorway, however, is clearly human-made. The contrast between natural formation and precise carving creates a visual tension that contributes to the site's enduring sense of ambiguity. It is as if nature provided the canvas, and human hands introduced a form that still defies complete explanation. Standing before Aramu Muru today, Visitors often describe a sense of stillness that feels distinct from other archaeological sites. The absence of surrounding structures amplifies this effect. There is no clear narrative path to follow, no sequence of ruins leading to a central explanation. Instead, there is only the rock face, the carved opening, and the landscape stretching endlessly into the Andes. And so the questions remain. What compelled ancient people to carve such a precise form into this remote stone formation? Was it a functional space, a symbolic marker, or something whose original purpose has been entirely lost to time? And why does this single feature continue to inspire interpretations that range from the archaeological to the deeply metaphysical? Aramu Muru endures as a silent presence in the Andean highlands, neither fully explained nor fully defined. It offers structure without certainty, form without context, and meaning without closure. And as the wind moves across the high plateau, slipping through the carved opening and disappearing into the vastness beyond, one question lingers in the still air. Is Aramu Muru simply a remnant of an ancient carving tradition, or does it represent something that human understanding has not yet fully learned how to see? As the carved doorway of Aramu Muru fades into the cold silence of the Andean plateau, its stone frame dissolving into wind and altitude, our journey turns once more across continents and time. The highlands recede. The air thickens again, heavy with moisture and the scent of earth shaped by rivers rather than rock. We descend into the lowlands of what is now the southern United States, where broad floodplains stretch beneath a sky that feels endlessly open. Here, in present-day Louisiana, another ancient landscape emerges, one shaped not by mountains or stone-cut temples, but by earth itself carefully arranged into monumental form. Poverty Point rises subtly from the Mississippi Delta, so gradually that it is easy to overlook at first. From ground level, it appears as a series of low, sweeping ridges curving across the land like the contours of a forgotten pattern. But from above, the true scale becomes clear. The site reveals an immense geometric design, concentric earthworks forming half-circles, interrupted by straight embankments and radiating mounds that extend outward like spokes from a central hub. Constructed between roughly 1700 BC and 1100 BC, Poverty Point is one of the most significant archaeological sites in North America. It was built by a prehistoric culture often referred to simply as the Poverty Point people, long before the rise of later native civilizations in the region. What makes the site extraordinary is not only its age, but its scale and complexity. Massive amounts of earth were moved without the use of metal tools or draft animals, reshaping the natural landscape into a carefully planned ceremonial and social center. At the heart of the site lies a large central plaza, surrounded by earthen ridges that form a series of nested arcs. Beyond these rise 6 large mounds, some reaching heights that dominate the surrounding flatlands. One of the largest, known as Mound A, is often described as bird-shaped when viewed from above, though interpretations of its exact form and symbolism vary. These structures were not randomly placed. They reflect deliberate planning, coordinated effort, and an understanding of spatial design that continues to draw study and debate. Archaeologists generally interpret Poverty Point as a major gathering site, possibly serving as a center for trade, ritual, and seasonal assembly. Evidence suggests that people traveled from great distances to reach it, bringing with them materials such as stone, copper, and other goods not locally available in the Delta region. This indicates the existence of extensive trade networks long before the emergence of agriculture-based urban centers in the region. Yet the question remains, what exactly brought so many people together in this specific location? Unlike later civilizations, the Poverty Point culture left no written records. Everything known about the site comes from its physical structure and the artifacts discovered within it. Stone tools, cooking remains, and imported materials suggest a society that was highly mobile and interconnected. But the absence of domestic structures within the main earthworks raises questions about how the site was used on a day-to-day basis. Was Poverty Point a permanent settlement, or something more episodic, activated only during specific times of the year? Some researchers suggest it functioned primarily as a ceremonial gathering place where dispersed groups assembled for trade, ritual exchange, and social coordination. In this view, the monumental earthworks may have served as a shared symbolic landscape rather than a continuously inhabited city. The sheer scale of construction, however, complicates this interpretation. It is estimated that millions of cubic meters of soil were moved to create the site. Without modern tools, this would have required sustained communal effort over generations. How did a society without centralized political structures, as understood in later civilizations, coordinate such an undertaking? Mainstream archaeology suggests that social cohesion, shared belief systems, and seasonal cooperation could have enabled large-scale construction projects. Yet the exact mechanisms remain partially speculative. Another striking feature is the alignment and geometry of the earthworks. The concentric ridges and radial embankments form a pattern that appears intentionally designed, though its precise meaning is not fully understood. Some researchers propose that the layout may reflect cosmological principles, possibly related to celestial observation or symbolic representation of the landscape. Others interpret it as a functional design that organized movement, gathering, and exchange within the site. The mounds themselves also raise questions. While some appear to have served practical or residential purposes, others show little evidence of long-term habitation. Were these structures primarily symbolic, marking social or ritual significance rather than everyday use? If so, what beliefs guided their placement and form? More speculative interpretations occasionally suggest that Poverty Point may represent a much more complex social system than previously assumed. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have proposed that the site reflects a sophisticated understanding of engineering and landscape design that has not been fully recognized in early North American prehistory. Others have wondered whether the site's geometry encodes information about seasonal cycles or broader environmental knowledge. These ideas remain unverified, yet they highlight how much of the site's meaning still resists definitive explanation. The materials found at Poverty Point add further depth to the mystery. Exotic stones such as basalt and soapstone, originating from distant regions, indicate long-distance exchange networks spanning hundreds of kilometers. This suggests not only movement of goods, but also the movement of ideas, knowledge, and cultural practices across vast territories. How these networks were organized and what role Poverty Point played within them remains an open question. Environmental conditions may also have influenced the site's development. The Mississippi River floodplain is a dynamic and shifting landscape, shaped by seasonal changes and long-term geological processes. Building a stable monumental complex in such an environment would have required careful adaptation. Yet, the earthworks have endured for thousands of years, suggesting both resilience and careful placement. Standing within Poverty Point today, the scale of the design becomes more apparent than its details. The ridges curve gently across the land, forming patterns that are easiest to appreciate from above. On the ground, however, the experience is more subtle, an interplay of elevation, distance, and open space. It is a landscape that seems designed for gathering, movement, and observation rather than enclosure. And yet, despite decades of study, the full meaning of Poverty Point remains elusive. Why invest so much labor into shaping the earth in this precise way? What social or spiritual forces sustained such a monumental effort over generations? and what kind of worldview emerges from a society that organized its landscape on this scale without leaving written explanation behind. Poverty Point endures as both achievement and enigma. It stands as evidence of remarkable human coordination in deep antiquity, yet it refuses to be fully translated into modern terms. The Earth itself holds the shape of intention, but not its final explanation. And as the wind moves across the Louisiana plains, tracing the curves of ancient ridges and disappearing into the horizon, one question remains suspended in the stillness. How much of Poverty Point's purpose has truly been understood, and how much still lies encoded in the geometry of the land itself? Poverty Point. As the sweeping earthworks of Poverty Point fade into the low, humid horizon of the Mississippi Delta, their immense geometry dissolving back into the contours of the land, our journey turns once more toward the high desert of the American Southwest. The air shifts again, dry, thin, and sharp with altitude. The landscape becomes vast and austere, where stone and silence dominate and distance itself feels measured in something older than time. Here, in what is now northwestern New Mexico, lies a place where human ambition once reshaped an entire canyon system into one of the most complex architectural landscapes in prehistoric North America. Chaco Canyon opens like a wound in the earth, a broad, sunlit corridor carved between mesas and sandstone cliffs. At first glance, it appears desolate, wind-scoured, remote, and unforgiving. Yet, scattered across this canyon floor are the remnants of something extraordinary. Monumental stone structures, carefully engineered roads, and vast, ceremonial buildings that suggest a level of social organization and astronomical awareness that continues to challenge modern interpretation. The most prominent of these structures are the great houses, massive, multi-story stone complexes such as Pueblo Bonito, Chetro Kettle, and Casa Rinconada. Built primarily between approximately 850 AD and 1150 AD, these structures were constructed by the ancestral Puebloan peoples. Their walls are composed of finely shaped sandstone blocks, carefully fitted together in patterns that reflect both structural ingenuity and aesthetic precision. From a distance, Pueblo Bonito appears almost geometric in design, a sweeping arc of rooms and plazas forming a D-shaped complex that once contained hundreds of interconnected spaces. At its height, it may have housed ceremonial gatherings, administrative functions, and storage systems that supported a much wider regional network of settlements. The scale alone is striking, multi-story walls rising in the middle of an otherwise remote canyon, as if the landscape itself had been reorganized around human intention. Yet, Chaco Canyon is not defined solely by its architecture. It is defined by connection. Radiating outward from the canyon are a network of engineered roads, some remarkably straight, extending for kilometers across rugged terrain, cutting through natural obstacles rather than avoiding them. These roads link Chaco to outlying settlements scattered across the wider region. In some cases, they appear to align with specific landscape features, such as buttes, mesas, or celestial reference points. What purpose did these roads serve? Were they purely practical routes for trade and communication, or did they carry deeper ceremonial or symbolic meaning? Mainstream archaeology generally interprets Chaco Canyon as the center of a regional cultural system. Rather than a single city, it is often described as a hub within a broader network of smaller communities. The great houses may have functioned as ceremonial centers, administrative nodes, or gathering places for seasonal events. Trade goods, turquoise, ceramics, macaws from distant southern regions, suggest long-distance exchange networks that connected Chaco to a much larger world. Yet, even within this framework, many aspects remain unresolved. One of the most intriguing features of Chaco Canyon is its apparent astronomical alignment. Several structures appear to be oriented in relation to solar and lunar cycles. At Casa, for example, carefully positioned openings allow light to enter in alignment with specific solar events, suggesting that celestial observation played a role in architectural design. Other structures appear to track lunar standstills or solstice positions, indicating a sophisticated understanding of long-term astronomical cycles. Was this knowledge purely practical, used to regulate agricultural and ceremonial calendars? Or did it reflect a deeper cosmological worldview in which architecture, landscape, and sky were interconnected parts of a single system? The canyon itself adds another layer of complexity. Chaco is located in a region with limited water resources, where sustaining large populations would have required careful environmental adaptation. Archaeological evidence suggests that water management systems, including dams and reservoirs, were used to capture and direct seasonal runoff. Yet, the scale of construction raises questions about how such a system could have supported the level of activity implied by the great houses. Some researchers have suggested that Chaco Canyon represents an early form of regional integration, where architecture served as a medium for organizing complex social relationships across vast distances. Others emphasize its ceremonial dimension, proposing that the canyon functioned as a sacred geography in which physical space mirrored cosmological principles. More speculative perspectives occasionally extend further, suggesting that the precision of alignments, the scale of construction, and the integration of roads and structures may reflect knowledge systems that are not yet fully understood in their totality. These interpretations remain outside mainstream consensus, but they persist as part of broader conversations about the intellectual depth of ancient North American societies. Perhaps what makes Chaco Canyon so compelling is not any single feature, but the way all its elements interact. Stone architecture rising from desert floor, roads cutting through open space, celestial alignments embedded in structure, and a landscape that appears deliberately shaped for both human and cosmic observation. Walking through the canyon today, silence is not emptiness, it is presence. The walls of Pueblo Bonito still stand, weathered but intact, their rooms open to sky and wind. The great kivas sit quietly in the earth, their circular forms echoing something older than memory. The roads extend outward, fading into distance and dust, as if still pointing toward destinations that have not been forgotten, only lost. And so the questions remain suspended in the desert air. What kind of society could coordinate such a vast and intricate network across an unforgiving landscape? Was Chaco Canyon a permanent center of life, or a place activated by cycles we no longer fully perceive? And how much of its meaning was written not in symbols or texts, but in the relationship between stone, sky, and movement itself? Chaco Canyon endures as a place where structure and silence coexist without resolution. It does not offer answers so much as it preserves patterns that suggest intention, knowledge, and connection, yet resist final interpretation. And as the sun moves across the canyon walls, casting long shadows through ancient stone corridors, one thought remains. Was Chaco Canyon fully understood by those who built it, or is it still speaking in a language that the present has not yet learned how to hear? As the vast canyon of Chaco fades into the desert silence, its monumental roads dissolving into dust and distance, our journey turns once more across the Atlantic. The heat of the southwest gives way to a colder, sharper wind, one shaped by salt water, granite, and time. Far to the north, on a remote island off the coast of Scotland, the landscape narrows into moorland and stone, where the horizon feels close and the sky hangs low. Here, in the Orkney Islands, another structure waits, small in scale compared to the great complexes of the world, yet no less unsettling in its mystery. The Dwarfie Stane lies carved into a massive block of old red sandstone on the island of Hoy. Unlike the sprawling ceremonial landscapes of Chaco Canyon or the engineered earthworks of distant continents, this site is intimate, almost hidden within the terrain. The stone itself is enormous, weathered by millennia of wind and rain, split naturally from the surrounding rock formation. Yet within its face, a chamber has been hollowed out, an interior space cut directly into the stone, as if shaped by deliberate human intent. Approaching the site, the first impression is its isolation. The surrounding landscape is stark, rolling peat, scattered boulders, and the distant sound of wind moving across open ground. There are no nearby settlements, no obvious architectural companions. The Dwarfie Stane stands alone, embedded in the hillside like a forgotten thought preserved in rock. The chamber inside the stone is small, elongated, and carefully carved. It measures only a few meters in length, with a central space flanked by shallow recesses at either end. One recess appears to function as a bed-like platform, while another may have served as a storage niche or secondary resting space. A narrow entrance, once sealed by a stone slab, opens directly into the interior. Archaeologists generally date the carving of the chamber to the Neolithic period, likely around 3000 BC, though precise dating remains uncertain due to the absence of organic material suitable for radiocarbon analysis. The design is consistent with other rock-cut tombs and chambered structures found across Orkney, a region known for its rich prehistoric heritage, including sites such as Skara Brae and the Ring of Brodgar. In mainstream interpretation, the Dwarfie Stane is often classified as a tomb. Its layout resembles other megalithic burial chambers found throughout northern Europe, suggesting that it may have served as a place of interment or ritual deposition. The carved recesses could have held human remains or funerary offerings, while the enclosed space may have functioned as a symbolic passage between life and death. Yet there is something unusual about this site that continues to draw attention. Unlike many Neolithic tombs in Orkney, which are constructed from multiple stones arranged into chambers, the Dwarfie Stane is carved from a single massive block of rock. This technique, excavating an interior space directly from solid stone, is rare in the region. It requires not only significant labor, but also a precise understanding of material behavior, fracture lines, and long-term structural stability. How was this achieved with the tools available during the Neolithic period? Stone, antler, and bone tools are typically associated with such cultures, yet the level of interior carving seen in the Dwarfie Stane suggests sustained effort over an extended period. The interior surfaces show signs of deliberate shaping, as if the space was carefully refined rather than roughly hollowed. Local folklore adds another layer to the site's identity. In Orcadian tradition, the chamber is often associated with a giant or supernatural being, sometimes described as a dwarf or solitary figure who once inhabited the stone. According to one well-known legend, the interior space was used as a dwelling or resting place, and the impressions inside the chamber were said to be shaped by the body of this being. While clearly mythological in nature, such stories reflect how the site has been perceived across generations, not merely as an archaeological feature, but as something belonging to a liminal space between human and otherworldly explanation. These narratives, while not historical evidence, highlight an enduring sense of ambiguity surrounding the site. Why would such a confined and isolated space be carved so precisely into solid rock? Was it purely funerary, or did it hold additional significance that has not survived in material form? Some researchers have suggested that the Dwarfie Stane may represent an experimental or localized variation of broader Neolithic mortuary traditions. In this view, it could be part of a cultural landscape in which different communities expressed shared beliefs through diverse architectural forms. The chambered design aligns broadly with burial practices observed elsewhere in Orkney, yet its execution remains distinct. Others have pointed to the possibility that the site held symbolic or ritual significance beyond burial. The enclosed nature of the chamber, combined with its isolation, may suggest use in rites involving seclusion, transformation, or initiation. In many ancient cultures, confined stone spaces are associated with symbolic transitions, movement between states of existence rather than simple interment. Still, even these interpretations leave gaps. The absence of definitive human remains or artifacts limits what can be concluded with certainty. Over millennia, environmental conditions may have erased traces of organic material, or the site may have been cleared or reused in ways that removed original evidence. Without such context, the function of the Dwarfie Stane remains partially obscured. There are also more speculative interpretations that occasionally emerge in discussions of the site. Some suggest that its precision and isolation indicate a knowledge of stoneworking techniques that may not be fully accounted for within conventional Neolithic frameworks. Others propose that it could reflect a symbolic or astronomical function embedded in landscape placement, though no clear alignment has been definitively established. These ideas remain outside mainstream archaeology, yet they persist in part because the site itself offers so few concrete answers. The surrounding landscape adds to the sense of separation. Hoy is one of the more rugged islands in Orkney, shaped by cliffs, wind, and sea. The Dwarfie Stane sits not in a settlement or ceremonial complex, but in a relatively remote valley, far from other major prehistoric monuments. This isolation raises further questions. Was its location chosen for symbolic reasons, or simply dictated by the availability of suitable rock? Inside the chamber today, the silence is profound. The carved stone surfaces bear the marks of ancient tools, softened by time but still visible in places. The space feels enclosed, yet exposed at the same time, sheltered from the wind, yet open to interpretation. Light enters through the narrow doorway, shifting slowly across the interior as the day progresses. And so the questions remain suspended in this small stone chamber. Who carved this space into solid rock, and for what purpose? Was it a tomb, a refuge, a ritual enclosure, or something whose meaning has been entirely lost? And why does such a modest structure continue to provoke such deep uncertainty, even after centuries of study? The Dwarfie Stane endures not because it reveals its purpose, but because it resists final explanation. It stands as a single carved presence in a vast landscape of wind and stone, holding within it a silence that has not yet been fully translated. And as the wind moves across the Orkney Hills, slipping through the narrow entrance and vanishing into the interior chamber, one thought remains. Is the Dwarfie Stane simply a Neolithic tomb, or does it still preserve a fragment of understanding that modern eyes have yet to recover? As the carved runes of the Kensington stone fade into glass and curated silence, their disputed message suspended between history and interpretation, our journey once again crosses vast stretches of sea and time. The cold plains of North America dissolve into memory, replaced by the deep blue expanse of the Mediterranean. Here, where salt winds carry echoes of ancient trade routes and layered civilizations, lies an island whose quiet hills conceal one of the most enduring architectural enigmas of prehistoric Europe. The island of Gozo, part of present-day Malta, appears at first to be a landscape shaped by sun and sea alone. Rocky coastlines, low vegetation, and limestone terrain carved by centuries of wind. Yet beneath this modest exterior stands Ġgantija, a monumental complex of stone structures that predates even the pyramids of Egypt and Stonehenge. Rising from the earth in massive, curved formations, the site immediately challenges expectations of what early human societies were capable of achieving. The name Ġgantija comes from local tradition, meaning giant's tower, a reference to the impression left by its colossal stone blocks. Some of these megaliths weigh several tons, yet they are arranged in precise architectural patterns that form temple-like structures with apses, corridors, and central courts. The walls curve inward and outward in deliberate shapes, suggesting a design system that was both functional and symbolic. Archaeologists date Ġgantija to approximately 3600 BC, placing it among the earliest known freestanding stone structures in the world. It was built by the Ġgantija phase of Maltese prehistory, a culture that left behind a series of temple complexes across the Maltese archipelago. These structures share common architectural features: rounded walls, axial symmetry, and repeated use of large limestone blocks arranged without mortar. Yet Ġgantija stands out even within this remarkable tradition. The sheer size of the stones used in its construction raises immediate questions. How were these massive blocks transported and lifted without metal tools, wheels, or clearly documented mechanical systems? Mainstream archaeology suggests the use of rudimentary sledges, rollers, and coordinated human labor, possibly aided by gradual inclines and earthen ramps. Over time, repeated effort could have allowed even the largest stones to be moved into position. Still, the precision of the layout suggests more than brute force alone. The temple complex consists of two main structures enclosed within a shared boundary wall. Each temple follows a similar plan: a central corridor leading to semicircular chambers arranged in a clover-like pattern. This recurring design appears across multiple Maltese temple sites, indicating a shared architectural language. But what this language represented remains only partially understood. Was it purely functional, designed to organize ritual movement and gathering, or did it encode symbolic meanings tied to cosmology, fertility, or seasonal cycles? Inside the temples, archaeologists have discovered altars, stone slabs, and carved surfaces that suggest ritual activity. Evidence of animal remains indicates that offerings or feasting may have taken place within the complex. Some features appear aligned with solar events, particularly during solstices, when light enters the structures in specific ways that illuminate interior spaces. These alignments raise further questions. Was Ġgantija used as a form of astronomical observatory integrated into religious practice? Or were these alignments incidental, emerging from architectural choices guided by aesthetic or spatial considerations rather than deliberate celestial planning? The island environment itself adds another layer of complexity. Malta's limited natural resources mean that the construction of such massive structures would have required sustained communal organization and resource management. Stone had to be quarried, shaped, transported, and assembled in a landscape that offers no large river systems or forests to support heavy logistical infrastructure. How did a Neolithic society maintain such coordinated effort over generations? Mainstream interpretations suggest that Ġgantija was part of a broader network of ritual centers spread across Malta and Gozo, forming a ceremonial landscape rather than isolated monuments. These temples may have functioned as focal points for community gatherings, agricultural rituals, and social cohesion. In this view, their construction reflects not centralized authority in the modern sense, but shared cultural and spiritual systems that motivated collective labor. Yet even within this framework, many aspects remain unresolved. One of the most intriguing features of Ġgantija is its longevity. The structures were in use for centuries before eventually falling into disuse around 2500 BC. The reasons for this decline are not fully understood. Environmental change, social transformation, or shifts in religious practice may all have played a role, but no single explanation has been universally accepted. The absence of written records from the Ġgantija builders means that interpretation relies entirely on material remains. Architecture becomes language, stone becomes narrative, but the meanings embedded within that language remain partially opaque. Some researchers have proposed that the temples reflect a form of early cosmological mapping, where architectural space mirrored beliefs about fertility, life cycles, and celestial order. The curved chambers and central axes may have represented symbolic transitions between states of existence, life, death, and rebirth, expressed through movement within the structure itself. Others suggest that the repeated architectural patterns across multiple sites indicate a standardized ritual system, possibly governed by shared cultural norms that extended across islands and generations. This level of consistency implies communication and coordination between communities, even in the absence of centralized political structures. More speculative interpretations occasionally suggest that the precision and scale of Ġgantija reflect a level of prehistoric engineering knowledge that is not yet fully understood within conventional frameworks. These ideas remain outside mainstream archaeology, but they persist in discussions about the intellectual capabilities of early Mediterranean societies. What remains undisputed is the extraordinary effort required to build such a complex. Standing within Ġgantija today, the sense of scale is both immediate and disorienting. The walls rise in layered curves, enclosing space in a way that feels both protective and intentional. Light filters through openings in shifting patterns, moving across stone surfaces that have stood for more than 5 millennia. The air is still, yet the architecture feels active, as if shaped by both human intention and environmental rhythm. And yet, for all its physical presence, Ġgantija resists full narrative closure. It does not reveal who precisely led its construction, how decisions were made, or what beliefs guided its design in detail. It offers structure without explanation, form without explicit meaning. In this way, it becomes less a solved artifact and more an ongoing question preserved in stone. And so the questions remain, as they do across so many ancient landscapes. What kind of worldview could produce architecture of this scale and precision at such an early point in human history? How were knowledge, labor, and belief coordinated across generations to sustain such a project? And what meanings, practical, symbolic, or spiritual, were encoded within the curved walls of Ġgantija that still have not been fully deciphered? As the Mediterranean wind moves across Gozo's limestone hills, slipping through the ancient chambers and dissolving into the open sea beyond, one thought lingers in the quiet. Is Ġgantija fully understood as a monument of Neolithic ingenuity? Or does it still hold layers of meaning that remain just beyond the reach of modern interpretation, waiting to be seen again in a different light? As the massive limestone curves of Ġgantija fade into the Mediterranean wind, their ancient silhouettes dissolving into salt and horizon, our journey once again crosses oceans and continents. The warmth of the Maltese Islands gives way to the cooler, expansive air of North America. Forests stretch across plains, rivers cut through wide valleys, and in the quiet, rural landscapes of Minnesota, another object emerges from the ground, not built into the earth, but seemingly revealed by it. The Kensington Runestone lies modestly within this northern landscape, a gray slab of stone that at first glance appears unremarkable. Yet its surface carries inscriptions that have sparked more than a century of debate, curiosity, and division. Discovered in 1898 near Kensington, Minnesota, by Swedish immigrant farmer Olof Oman, the stone was reportedly found entangled within the roots of a tree that had been uprooted during land clearing. That detail alone has become part of its enduring mystery. The stone itself is not large, roughly rectangular, weathered but still legible in places. Across its surface are carved runic inscriptions, lines of angular symbols that resemble the writing systems used in medieval Scandinavia. When translated, the text appears to describe a group of Norse explorers traveling through unfamiliar territory in the year 1362 BC, leaving behind a record of hardship and loss. The inscription speaks of a journey inland, referencing men who were far from the sea, encountering unknown lands and suffering difficulties during their expedition. It concludes with a message of remembrance, carved as if to preserve the memory of those who may not have survived. If taken literally, the implications are extraordinary. It would suggest that Norse explorers reached deep into the interior of North America more than a century before Columbus, traveling far beyond the coastal regions confirmed by archaeological evidence in Newfoundland. Yet mainstream historical consensus remains deeply skeptical of this interpretation. Linguists, archaeologists, and historians generally classify the Kensington Runestone as a modern artifact, most likely carved in the late 19th century. Their reasoning is based on several factors: inconsistencies in the rune forms, linguistic patterns that do not match known medieval Norse usage, and stylistic elements that appear influenced by later scholarly reconstructions of Viking writing rather than authentic medieval inscriptions. In this view, the stone is not a relic of pre-Columbian exploration, but a product of immigrant culture, perhaps an expression of identity, imagination, or even local storytelling traditions brought to life in carved form. Yet the debate has never fully settled. One of the reasons for its persistence lies in the complexity of the inscription itself. The text is not random or simplistic. It demonstrates a structured narrative, with directional references, numerical information, and linguistic coherence that has led some to question whether it could have been created without deeper knowledge of Norse language traditions. While critics argue that such knowledge was accessible in the 19th century through academic publications, supporters of its authenticity point to specific grammatical irregularities that do not neatly align with known modern forgeries. The circumstances of its discovery also continue to draw attention. According to Olof Oman, the stone was found buried beneath tree roots on his farmland. Some observers have noted that the depth and positioning of the stone at the time of discovery raise questions about how it came to rest there. Could it have been placed deliberately in earlier times, or could agricultural activity and natural processes account for its position underground? Soil movement, erosion, and long-term environmental change offer plausible explanations, yet uncertainty remains in the absence of definitive documentation. Over time, the Kensington Runestone has been examined through multiple scientific and linguistic lenses. Geological studies have analyzed weathering patterns on its surface, attempting to determine whether the inscription could have endured centuries of exposure or is more consistent with recent carving. Microscopic analysis of tool marks has also been conducted, comparing the grooves on the stone to both medieval and modern carving techniques. The results, however, have not produced universal agreement, leaving interpretation open to continued debate. Beyond scientific analysis, the stone has taken on a cultural life of its own. For some communities, particularly those of Scandinavian descent in the United States, it represents a symbolic link to ancestral heritage, a tangible connection, however uncertain, to narratives of exploration and endurance. For others, it serves as a reminder of how history can be shaped not only by evidence, but also by interpretation, desire, and cultural imagination. And yet, even within skeptical frameworks, certain questions remain difficult to fully dismiss. If the stone is a forgery, what motivated its creation? Was it an attempt at storytelling, a personal experiment in linguistic reconstruction, or a broader cultural expression rooted in immigrant identity? And why was it placed in a rural landscape where it would eventually be discovered decades later, rather than preserved or publicly presented? If, on the other hand, there is any possibility, however remote, that it reflects an older tradition, then what would that mean for our understanding of transatlantic contact before Columbus? The confirmed presence of Norse settlements in Greenland and Newfoundland already establishes that exploration across the North Atlantic occurred. Could inland expansion have been more extensive than currently documented, leaving only fragments like this behind? Mainstream archaeology remains cautious, emphasizing the lack of corroborating evidence such as settlements, artifacts, or additional inscriptions in the region that would support a broader Norse presence in Minnesota during the 14th century BC. Without such supporting material, the stone remains isolated, an outlier rather than part of a larger pattern. And yet, isolation itself can be part of what sustains mystery. The Kensington Runestone exists as a single object carrying a complete narrative, but without a surrounding context that firmly anchors it in time or culture. It is this disconnect between message and material environment that continues to fuel discussion. It stands alone, speaking in a voice that feels both familiar and uncertain at the same time. Today, the stone is preserved in a museum where it is studied, questioned, and interpreted through multiple disciplinary lenses. Visitors stand before it, reading its lines, comparing translations, and weighing possibilities that range from historical artifact to cultural creation. But the stone itself does not change. It neither confirms nor denies its own origin. It simply presents its carved testimony, unchanged by debate or analysis. And so the questions remain suspended in the space between certainty and possibility. Who carved the Kensington Runestone, and for what purpose? Was it a genuine record of forgotten exploration, or a later expression shaped by memory and imagination? And why does a single piece of stone, resting quietly in a museum, continue to challenge the boundaries of what we consider historically possible? As with so many artifacts in this journey, the answer does not present itself easily. Instead, it lingers, etched into stone, carried by language, and held within the tension between what is known and what is still uncertain. As the inscription on the Kensington Runestone settles back into museum glass and scholarly debate, its uncertain message fading into catalog numbers and archival lighting, our journey once again turns southward across the equator. The cold plains of North America dissolve into memory, replaced by the rising terrain of the Andes foothills in South America. Here, in the highlands of what is now Colombia, the landscape shifts into rolling valleys, where stone formations rise from the earth in ordered silence. This is El Infiernito, the Little Hell, as it was later named by Spanish colonizers who encountered its strange arrangement of stone pillars. Yet the original builders, the Muisca civilization, knew it by a different significance entirely. To them, this was not a place of damnation, but a structured landscape of cosmology, ritual, and observation. Spread across a grassy plateau near the town of Villa de Leyva, El Infiernito consists of dozens of upright stone columns arranged in parallel rows. At first glance, they resemble a primitive stone forest, weathered, uneven, and partially submerged in the soil. But their placement is not random. The stones are aligned in deliberate patterns that suggest astronomical and ceremonial intent. Archaeological studies generally date the site to the pre-Columbian Muisca culture, flourishing in the Andean highlands long before European contact. The stones themselves are simple in form, unshaped or minimally shaped monoliths standing vertically in rows that stretch across the landscape. Nearby, additional stones form circular arrangements and possible ceremonial enclosures. One of the most widely accepted interpretations is that El Infiernito functioned as an astronomical observatory. The Muisca were known for their advanced understanding of celestial cycles, particularly those related to agriculture and ritual calendars. At certain times of the year, shadows cast by the standing stones align with solar events, marking solstices and equinoxes with remarkable precision. But how deliberate were these alignments? Were they engineered with full awareness of long-term astronomical cycles, or did they evolve gradually through repeated observation and adjustment over generations? Mainstream archaeology leans toward the former, a sophisticated but grounded system of celestial tracking embedded within ritual life. In this interpretation, El Infiernito was not merely an observatory in the modern sense, but a sacred landscape where astronomy, agriculture, and spirituality were deeply intertwined. The stones may have functioned as markers for seasonal planting cycles, guiding agricultural activity in a region where environmental timing was essential for survival. Ceremonial gatherings likely took place here, linking celestial events to communal rituals that reinforced social cohesion and cosmological understanding. Yet even within this framework, many details remain uncertain. The name El Infiernito itself reflects colonial interpretation rather than indigenous understanding. Spanish chroniclers, unfamiliar with its purpose, associated the site with pagan ritual and superstition, leading to its negative naming. This cultural misinterpretation has long influenced how the site was perceived, obscuring its original meaning beneath layers of external judgment. Stripping away later labels reveals a more complex picture, a structured landscape designed with intention, yet without written explanation. The Muisca left no surviving texts that directly describe the purpose of each stone alignment, leaving interpretation to archaeology, oral tradition, and comparative study. Some researchers have suggested that El Infiernito may have served as a ritual calendar encoded into the land itself. The spacing between stones could correspond to solar intervals, lunar cycles, or agricultural phases. In this view, the site becomes a three-dimensional calendar, one that requires movement through space to interpret time. Walking between the columns today, one experiences a subtle shift in perception. The stones are not towering monuments, but human-scale markers embedded in open space. The horizon remains visible at every point, and the sky dominates the experience. It is not difficult to imagine how celestial events would have been observed from this vantage point, with the stones acting as fixed reference points against a moving sky. Still, questions remain about how such knowledge was organized and transmitted. Was this system the result of centralized planning by specialized knowledge keepers, or a collective tradition refined over generations of observation? The absence of written records leaves this question open, and interpretations vary depending on how one understands the structure of Muisca society. More speculative interpretations occasionally extend beyond mainstream archaeology. Some suggest that the precision of certain alignments may indicate a more advanced astronomical system than is currently recognized. Others propose that the site could encode multiple layers of meaning simultaneously, astronomical, agricultural, and symbolic, interwoven into a single spatial design. These ideas remain outside established consensus, yet they reflect the continuing effort to understand how ancient peoples perceived time and space. The surrounding landscape adds another dimension to the mystery. The plateau on which El Infiernito stands is naturally open and elevated, offering wide visibility of the sky. This makes it an ideal location for celestial observation, but it also raises questions about selection. Why was this specific site chosen? Was it selected purely for practical visibility, or did it hold symbolic significance within Muisca cosmology? Nearby archaeological finds suggest that the area was not isolated, but part of a broader cultural landscape. Settlements, burial sites, and agricultural zones indicate a region shaped by sustained human activity. El Infiernito may have functioned as one node within a larger network of ritual and observational sites, each contributing to a shared understanding of time and order. Yet even if this network existed, its full structure remains unknown. The stones themselves offer no inscriptions, no explicit markers of meaning. Their language is spatial rather than textual, expressed through position, alignment, and relation. Interpreting that language requires reconstruction, an attempt to translate landscape into narrative. And like many such ancient systems, some of that translation remains incomplete. Standing among the stone columns today, the experience is one of quiet repetition. Rows extend into the distance, each stone slightly different in shape and angle, yet collectively forming a coherent arrangement. The wind moves through the grass, and shadows shift slowly across the ground as the sun travels overhead. Nothing about the scene suggests finality. Everything suggests process. And so the questions remain, suspended in the open air of the plateau. How much of El Infiernito's design reflects precise astronomical calculation, and how much reflects symbolic interpretation of the sky? Was this a site of observation, ritual, or both intertwined in ways that cannot be easily separated? And what aspects of its meaning have been lost not through destruction, but through the absence of explanation? As the sun sets over the Andean highlands, casting long shadows between the standing stones, the site becomes something neither fully understood nor fully unknown. It exists in a space between interpretation and silence, where geometry meets sky and where meaning is suggested rather than declared. And in that silence, one thought remains. Are we looking at an ancient observatory shaped by careful understanding of the heavens, or at a fragment of a larger cosmological system that has not yet been fully reassembled? As the stone rows of El Infiernito fade into the Andean horizon, their quiet geometry dissolving into wind and altitude, the journey turns once more across oceans and time. The warmth of the highlands gives way to a colder, salt-laden air. Gray skies gather above a rugged coastline where land meets sea in fractured cliffs and rolling grass. Here, in the Orkney Islands off the northern edge of Scotland, the landscape feels stripped down to its essentials: stone, wind, and memory. On the island of Rousay, known for its dense concentration of prehistoric remains, Midhowe chambered cairn lies stretched along the edge of a low hillside, its presence subtle until one stands directly before it. From the outside, it appears as a long, low mound of earth and stone, partially reclaimed by grass and time. There is nothing immediately grand or imposing about it. And yet, beneath that unassuming exterior lies a carefully constructed stone passage that extends deep into the mound's interior. Entering Midhowe is like stepping into a slowed-down version of time itself. A narrow stone corridor leads inward, flanked by large slabs that form the walls of a long burial chamber. As the eye adjusts to the dimness, the structure reveals its full complexity, a central passage divided into multiple compartments by upright stone dividers, each section forming a small cell within the larger tomb. The roof, now partially reconstructed for preservation, once enclosed the entire space in complete darkness. Archaeologists date Midhowe chambered cairn to the Neolithic period, roughly around 3,500 BC to 2,800 BC. It is part of a wider tradition of chambered cairn construction found throughout Orkney, including sites such as Midhowe and Unstan. These structures were built by communities who left no written records, yet who clearly possessed advanced knowledge of stone construction, spatial organization, and ceremonial architecture. The cairn's design follows a deliberate pattern. The central passage aligns with multiple burial compartments on either side, suggesting a structured approach to the placement of remains. Human bones have been found within the chambers, often disarticulated and commingled, indicating repeated use over time rather than single-event burials. This suggests that Midhowe was not simply a tomb in the modern sense, but a long-term site of funerary practice. But what exactly did that practice involve? Mainstream archaeology generally interprets chambered cairns like Midhowe as communal burial sites tied to ancestor veneration. In this view, the dead were placed within the structure over generations, their remains becoming part of a collective ancestral presence embedded within the landscape. The cairn was not only a resting place, but a focus of ritual activity, where memory, identity, and lineage were materially anchored in stone. Yet even within this framework, important questions remain. Why divide the interior into such precise compartments? Was each chamber associated with specific family groups, social roles, or ritual categories? Or did the spatial organization reflect symbolic ideas about transition, journey, or transformation after death? The architecture suggests intention beyond simple deposition. The careful alignment of walls, the measured spacing of chambers, and the controlled narrowing of the passage all imply that movement through the cairn may have held significance. Entering the structure requires a gradual shift from open light into confined darkness, from external landscape into enclosed interior space. Was this transition symbolic? Did it represent passage between states of existence, life to death, presence to memory, or individual identity to collective ancestry? The cairn's location also adds depth to its interpretation. Positioned on a slope overlooking the surrounding land and sea, Midhowe is not hidden away but placed within a visible landscape. From certain angles, it blends into the contours of the hillside. From others, it subtly asserts itself against the horizon. This interplay between concealment and visibility may not be accidental. Across Orkney, Neolithic monuments often appear to engage directly with their environment, integrating natural features into their design. Midhowe is no exception. The cairn seems to occupy a liminal space, neither fully exposed nor fully hidden, neither entirely natural nor entirely constructed. Inside the chamber today, the silence is dense, but not empty. The stone walls carry the weight of time, and the air feels still, as though movement itself has slowed. The reconstructed roof filters light in controlled ways, allowing only limited visibility into the deeper sections of the cairn. Standing within it, one becomes acutely aware of scale, not grand in height, but compressed in depth and repetition. And yet, despite extensive archaeological study, the original sensory experience of the cairn remains partially inaccessible. How did it feel when fully sealed, with only torchlight or daylight entering from the narrow passage? What sounds, rituals, or movements once filled this confined space? Some researchers suggest that chambered cairns like Midhowe may have been used not only for burial, but for ritual ceremonies involving periodic re-entry. In this interpretation, the cairn functioned as an active site where the dead were revisited, their remains reorganized or interacted with over time. This would imply a very different relationship between the living and the dead, one that emphasizes continuity rather than separation. Others propose that the architectural structure itself may encode symbolic meanings related to cosmology or seasonal cycles. The passage, chambers, and divisions could represent stages of transformation, mirroring natural processes of decay, renewal, or celestial movement. While these interpretations are difficult to confirm, they highlight the possibility that the cairn's design operated on multiple levels simultaneously: practical, social, and symbolic. More speculative ideas occasionally suggest that the precision and endurance of these Neolithic constructions reflect a level of planning and shared knowledge that has not been fully reconstructed. While there is no evidence of lost technologies or external influence, the coordination required to build such enduring stone structures continues to draw attention to the sophistication of Neolithic communities in Orkney. What remains firmly grounded is the scale of effort required. Each stone within Midhowe had to be selected, transported, and positioned without metal tools or mechanical assistance. The alignment of the passage, the stability of the chambers, and the long-term durability of the structure all point to careful planning and sustained communal labor. And yet, despite this clarity of construction, the cairn does not fully reveal its meaning. It preserves form without explanation, structure without narrative. The bones found within it speak of human presence, but not of lived experience. The stone defines space, but not intention. As one moves back through the narrow passage toward daylight, the transition is gradual. The darkness gives way to dim gray, then to open sky and wind. The landscape outside feels expansive again, but something of the interior remains, an impression of enclosed time, layered memory, and unresolved purpose. And so the questions remain, held within the stone walls of Midhowe. What beliefs shaped the decision to build such a structure in this precise form? How did Neolithic communities understand the relationship between space, death, and memory? And what aspects of that understanding have been preserved not in written record, but only in architecture itself? As the Orkney wind moves across the hillside and the cairn settles once more into silence, one thought lingers. Is Midhowe chambered cairn simply a collective burial site? Or does it preserve a more complex vision of existence that has yet to be fully reassembled from the fragments of stone and time?